Hello, my friends. Just a quick update note here on the podcast, Substack projects. Feel free to skip ahead if you're not interested. The timestamps are below for the podcast. You'll note the podcast hasn't been released so much recently. That's because of me primarily and the insidious large amount of work I've had going on recently. Mostly it's because I volunteered. Idiot. And you'll note from the last ad, a large chunk of that work was editing the giant seminar and series that was being advertised. The product itself is now with Nick Thatcher. It's original Falcon Publications, and I think he's deciding on how he wants to divvy it up for all of you. Obviously, there's about 7 days of material. So it's been quite a cumbersome and laborious process. I'm just glad the content was what it was, and it wasn't, an accountant, meetup or something that I was editing. It was difficult because a lot of the footage is very old. It's about 25 years old or more now, a quarter of a century. Think about that. Isn't that frightening? So I just wanted to offer a few quick words on some of the things that struck me while I was editing the material. And what strikes me more than ever, and I know I do talk about this a little bit, is that even in the current day, with all the influences, solar woo-fluences, repeat, obsessives, esoteric bodybuilders, Huberman protocol tards, even the niche bros, whatever other fads are out there, it just doesn't come close to the methods that this guy created and the insights that he derived from the methods. And importantly, the insights came afterwards, not before the work and the methods. Of course, he was a man of science, so he worked with monkeys, both human and monkeys with hair. And he did this for some time, so it makes sense that he was able to see us, more so than most people, I think, for what we really are. Many people will be averse to this point of view, but I think that once you've seen it in real time, you've seen it happen and you've seen someone get broken down in such a way that it can't really be unseen, and it has important personal implications as well as implications for how you see the world around you. So one of the major things I noticed is that it's one thing to get pissy about lying to other people or other people lying to you. But what's far worse and far more pernicious, in my opinion, is primarily how we're constantly lying to ourselves about what we want and how we're always in our own way. We get in our way. And as a result of this, what we tend to do is, as he would put it, we tend to steal pleasures like thieves in the night because we're too pathetic and to be honest about what we want and why we're doing it. And that struck me primarily, I'm sure for my own reasons, but it is on full display at these seminars. So it's not just a matter of words or psychoanalytic theory or what Nietzsche or Schopenhauer wrote in this book. You can see it happen. So one of the funniest types of lies that we can tell ourselves is how we try to cover up the desire to be recognized and to show off. And instead of being honest about this, what we all do is we tie ourselves up in idealisms and reasons. But at its base, it's basically a case of, I want you to acknowledge that I'm better than you, and I want you to celebrate me. I want you to acknowledge me. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with this. It's just fine. It's something that humans all do. But it's the way that we hide it and lie about it. And most of all, we lie about it to ourselves. But it's not even serious. It's really quite funny because when you see it, when you see someone and this isn't obvious to them that they're doing it, and it's exposed to them, and in particular in front of everyone has a laugh about it because it's really quite obvious. A lot of these things are very obvious in the way that they bubble under the surface, but we just don't notice it. We cannot notice it. And we get in our own ways because we just do not want to think about it. And in many ways, this is just an example, but this is what this method and process is all about. It's about not necessarily getting rid of, but to expose all these internal hang-ups created by the socialization process or by chance experience, and just getting out of our own way and allowing things to simply happen as they must, at least initially. So you can understand what your true unfiltered drives are. And I don't just mean it's limited to people wanting to show off. This is just a more amusing example, and perhaps in a contemporary time, it's quite appropriate, because I think that the reason entire life tracks can be spent on reflexively and reactively trying to show off. And the problem with that is nothing gets done and no one's honest about it. And that can be a problem for obvious reasons. The other thing is, what I noticed is a lot of this is not easy to get rid of. It's not exactly hardwired, but it is stubborn. It's very stubborn. So you can't just talk your way out of it. There needs to be a physiological or body angle tied up with it for it to be truly integrated. And there's reasons for that I won't go into because this is meant to be short. I'm already taking all your time. But the problem is with words is just because you speak about something or even you try to do something different, what ends up happening is you make it worse. You actually end up acting out the essential character structure, the psychic structure, in a different way. And as a result, you simply become more of a lol cow. I think that's the current language. You become a lol cow. So it was very interesting to see all this happen. So now that I'm more or less done with the project, I'll be attempting for my own part to actually live a little bit more, which is something I've been putting off for a while, which is really silly, particularly if you're not making decent coin out of a project, which I don't make any money out of any of this. But what can I say? It was a passion project. And for these reasons alone, I think it was well worth doing. Of course, when Hyatt was alive, I was really young. I was more or less just out of high school. So I never made it to these events. I did see them advertised at the time, but I never really had the money or the time at the time to be able to go and get to them. And there are problems associated with doing someone's work or someone's method and the way they put something together and not having access to them. And I think I was, and to this day, probably, I may be one of two people in Jailhouse Australia who has ever faithfully applied the material long term. And it's been extremely lonely, truth be told. This is one thing that Hyatt mentions, actually. He says that if you choose to take a path like this, which is a path of radical responsibility and radical living and radical self-change, it can be very lonely because this is the last thing that the human species is interested in, even though probably long-term, if it wants to survive, I think that it's going, at least some portion of the population will need to start looking at this. But it also means that the path is fraught with dangers because there's no one there to pull you up when you need to be pulled up. So for me, these seminars were kind of like a final piece of the puzzle where I could see how it all fits together with demonstrations with other people, and to get an idea of how it gets done in real time, which is crucial. Real time, how many of these techniques and various other things are applied in real time, as well as techniques that are not on the DVD that were probably learned from during his psychological work, which, you can't learn that from a book. This is hard for a number of reasons, particularly when you're young and stupid, of which I was very young and stupid. Arguably, I still am stupid. And in particular, when you're impatient and you're arrogant, which are hallmarks of youth. And again, not necessarily bad things, but if you do this kind of work, you can get yourself into trouble. And part of the issue is not obvious. It's not just when you're working with the body and its energies and behaviors that you can act them out in stupid and self-defeating ways. But the other issue is that sometimes not a lot happens for a long time. So you might even give it away for a while, because you might go 2 or 3 months, nothing really occurs. There's no fireworks or explosive experiences. And very often that's what young people are in it for. They're in it for all these catchphrases like being the overman, or, having like a psychedelic experience, man. Like, you know what I mean? No one really wants to do the character change. It's all about having the explosive experience. But this is not the point of the work. That's not what it's about, even though those things can happen. The unfortunate thing is, when you're young is also when you can derive the most benefit. So it is a bit of a quandary that young people face who are doing the work by themselves, because they do have an impatience and arrogance that sometimes means they get greatly sidetracked. And so I think this is the reason gurus exist. And I hesitate to call Hyatt a guru, but that's what he kind of was in some ways, at least with his own material, because there is someone there to keep you in line when you go off on ridiculous tangents or you're acting like a prick. Whatever it is, there's someone to pull you in line, where, of course, when you're by yourself, there's no one that can do that for you. It's just up to you and your personal maturity and experience, which, of course, you don't have when you're young. And even when you're older, like me, it can still be a problem. So I think it's safe to say that this seminar is good because it saves you a bit of time fucking around like a fucking prick, which is really the thing that is the problem for people like us. And, the truth is, I've discovered that not all tangents are equal. Not all esoteric techniques are equal. Not all techniques are required. This endless search for techniques and this endless thread-mongering is a bad habit. We're not capable of doing that much. We need to really choose something and stick to it, even when it's boring. Most theories are not in any way connected to the organic reality of our lives in any way whatsoever. So most of the stuff out there is more or less pointless, but it's rendered even more pointless when people just consume the person selling it and their material, and they don't do something with it. Because if you do something with it, then you notice what it does. Maybe it'll do nothing for you. Most things I've tried do nothing. They do nothing at all. So decades can be lost faffing on about nice sounding nonsense. And I think what's worse is these tangents are actually also a kind of part of this greater process. So without a guru type person who's gone through the process, and again, I hate using that word, I guess we can just use teacher, maybe, you can get stuck on various strains of nonsense for the rest of your life if you're not careful. And I've seen people do it. And it particularly happens in pseudo-spiritual or pseudo-philosophical circles where, in my opinion, as no doubt readers of this blog know, these things really amount to fantasy LARPing nonsense to make each other or make oneself feel better about feeling bad about life. But very few of these things fundamentally change anything because they're not getting to the root of the problem of being a human being. And as a result, because they don't get to the root of it, they don't lead to any tangible change or even really an untainted, legitimate spiritual experience. I mean, a real one, not just a fantasy one. So I think if you look online at the current crop of LARPers, I mean, you can tell it's not real, right? Because it's all colored by the same thing. It's all this sweetness and light. It's all, look at how good I feel. Of course, that doesn't last. Look how confident I am, because now, now my new belief is making me confident and my anxiety is gone and I'm no longer sucking schlongs on OnlyFans. Or, look at me, look at how enlightened I am in the Amazon forest. I'm so enlightened because I took drugs. Or, look, there's a reason that pastors keep getting nailed for smoking crack with male prostitutes, right? There's a reason this kind of thing happens. So in my experience, true spiritual transcendence, if that's what you're into, comes from what is at once, I suppose, a very boring and extremely demanding set of work or work process. And in large part, at least in the formative stages, it's extremely unpleasant a lot of the time, extremely destabilizing. And in the forthcoming podcast, Kevin and I talk a little bit about this. So I guess in summary, what I got for my own part was seeing people broken down in real time by a professional. I saw the professional expose things about this person to themselves. I saw how different behaviors relate to different parts of our multiple brains, which you should know by now, are not strictly unified. They're split in several ways and not just down the middle. There's different bits that don't communicate well with other bits. There's all these transverse and inverse splits, and some older parts overpower newer parts. It's a bit of a shit fight. But it's one thing for me to talk about this and to write about it and to even notice it in myself, but it's quite another to see another person break someone down in real time and expose these physiological dynamics to the individual and to show them how it is represented in their character. So finally, I think when it all comes out, it'll be good for you guys who are actually doing something, which is no doubt very few of you. It always has been very few and always will be. But I think that if you're working alone, when you see the seminar material, it will be very, very helpful for you. So keep an eye out for this. I will post release updates and I will let you know in due course when you can expect this material to come out. And finally, just a little bit more on the podcast itself coming up and where I think we're going to go with the whole thing. I'm just going to be blunt and hypocritical at the same time. I've grown to hate content. I hate people sending me endless streams of YouTube videos. I just hate it all. And I know it's hypocritical, but it is what it is. Most of it is nonsense, and it's nonsense for the reasons I'm describing. And the deeper you get into work, real work, and you start to focus on connecting the organic with what's in your head and connecting that with action in the real world, the less all this stuff online matters, because it doesn't matter. And a lot of the people peddling it know nothing. They know nothing. So although it's hypocritical and I'm criticizing content, I do still think content is quite useful. So coming up, what we're going to try and focus on is a little less of an informal rant or chit-chat energy and, structure, and to try and make it more focused, a bit more like a lecture or a seminar type thing. And this goes against, of course, all the accepted rules of content creation. But I think we'll be releasing much less consistently, but trying to waffle less, or at least I will anyway. I'm not sure Kevin is capable of that, frankly. So I'll have to forcibly mute him sometimes. So look out for that coming up. In this podcast in particular, it's just me and Kevin going through our experiences recently with the work. As you know, I've re-engaged with the work after a long time, and I'm taking it very, very seriously at the moment. We talk about real phenomenon, the feeling of what happens changing during the work, overwhelming streams of sensation or feeling energy coming up, other physiological states, and why these happen when you start to untie the mask, or take the mask off. One example that I give is like myself going through overwhelming fatigue at the moment, and this occurred after an all-encompassing bout of rage that stuck around for like a month. Like I was a few months, not just a month. So we talk about intense energetic dreams and other phenomenon loosely related to what you'd call Kundalini work, I suppose, but more correctly, work that is aimed at changing the human character more fundamentally. That's what this is all about. So it's not a total waste if you're doing this kind of stuff. And furthermore, I think that we talk about things that we get wrong or have gotten wrong in the past, which is very important to understand this, particularly if you're starting the work, because you could miss if you make the same mistakes we did. And this leads into conversations about the shortcomings of traditional approaches to these things, the arrogance of spiritual practitioners. And the biggest error of all is not building up when you're breaking things down. This is probably the most important thing. Okay, until next time, have a nice weekend. A bit of a lethargic spell at the moment. It was funny. Before it was anger when I first started. Then there was some other weird disassociative states, I would say. But recently, a lot of that more intense stuff has settled down, and now I'm sort of going into a period of, I wouldn't say boredom, but it's lethargy. I think it's the best way to describe it, really. It's not like I'm not doing the work, so I'm continuously doing it. So I'm not lazy in the sense that I'm not doing stuff. But anyway, that's what's come up at the moment. So
Hyatt talks about that, didn't he? He talked about that sometimes when the people who are doing the work, they kind of go into, I can't remember the phrase he used, but it's like a cocoon. You just go off into your own thing for a while, and then you come back out of it later. You just kind of withdraw for a while. So maybe it's just a withdrawal phase that you're in, where things are happening and changing in you, but they're just you're not ready to act on it yet, kind of thing. And he also talks about, some people, when they start doing the undoing work, they have to just stop their job. They just can't be a go to work person, or they have to leave their marriage or whatever it is, because you've just changed too many things. And also you're going to be slightly different for the other person, so you'll be different too. And undoing work probably does especially for relationships, probably does weird things like change your smell, things like that.
Yeah, probably does, right?
Because you're changing such lower systems and physiology. It's bound to have effect on basic animal attraction signals. So it's bound to affect relationships. And many people doing it, they end up with a different type of person than they used to go for, and that kind of thing. Or nobody. Some of them, nobody for a while. I like choice, chosen nobody, not sorry.
Incel.
Yes, voluntary, not involuntary. So, and there's something to be said for that, and that's obviously that's a classic technique as well as avoiding that kind of stuff to use the energy for other things. So, yeah. And if you take the unconscious side of things seriously and the work, you know, that most things going on are unconscious, and sometimes you only know what you were up to and what was going on later. Consciously, you find out later what you were really doing or what it all meant. You have no idea what things in you are planning and doing right now that you just don't know yet because they haven't unfolded yet.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing that you say, because one of the things I've been concentrating on this time in particular is this idea of allowing stuff and not causing it to happen. So I think I was thinking, and it's been interesting doing it again because I did it when I was younger, dumber, way dumber, as I'm discovering. And I think in the old days, I was trying to make something happen, if that makes sense. So when I was doing the work, I was kind of chasing a peak experience or some sort of, you know, feeling or some sort of intense experience, or maybe even an abstract goal, like to be the Nietzschean overman or fucking whatever other delusions people have, right? And I think that really colored pretty much the entire strain of work I was doing. Whereas this time around, I've just really been focused on just allowing things to happen. So I'll do the session, but I'm not seeking anything in my head. It's planned out, so there is a structure, but I'm not like, okay, that caused that to happen, so I'm going to do that exact same thing again just to get that effect. This time around, it's very much just do the thing, whatever comes up, and I've been trying to anchor it to the cognitive work a lot more than what I was doing the first time around. So I'm spending a lot more time writing things down, stuff that comes up. If there's character that shows itself, you know, taking notes, writing it down, analyzing it, looking at what metaphysical beliefs could undergird sort of what's going on. And I was just thinking, yeah, it's an entirely different thing. It's definitely much more about allowing. So there's a lot more uncertainty because I've just got no idea where it's going to take me. Whereas when I was younger, I'm like, this is what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it for this reason because I'm going to be Jesus or what, you know, whatever it is that people think about themselves, particularly when they're young. They've got all manner of complexes. So yeah, there's a lot more uncertainty, but I wouldn't say, along with the uncertainty, and particularly what I've noticed with the throat section and the throat work, which I've been spending a huge amount of time doing that this time around, because I think it is a problem area for me. What I've noticed is the desire to hang on to something tight, to really get worried about things and really have anxiety about situations that are changing and things that are going on. That's completely dissipated. So even though I'm allowing things to happen, I don't really know what's going to happen. Things are always changing. I'm not sure where it's going to lead me. At the same time, I'm not worried about it. I don't have any sense of anxiety about anything. So even the other day, I was thinking, you know, I could lose my job. You know, there could be a come back to the office order or something like this. And I won't go back because I just know that I can't do that whole thing again. And maybe before, there would be a sense of anxiety and, geez, I wonder what's going on. I wonder what the boss is thinking. I've got to find out what people are, you know, talking about in the office, rah, rah, rah. But this time around, it's just, there's no anxiety. I just don't care. I don't have a sense of fear or worry. Now, I'm just not hanging on to things. It's a really quite a profound difference to what I was, you know, the state of me, you know, even 6 or 8 months ago. It's a big thing. So I think that if people are listening to this, particularly young guys, Kevin makes a very valid point. The work itself is very much about allowing. It's not about having. You can have ideas, you can have guideposts, things like that. But I do think the process itself is somewhat mysterious, or very mysterious, very unknowable. And even though you're doing cognitive work and you're sorting yourself out, it is a process where you should take the mental posture that you're simply allowing things as a process to come up. So that's my little rant. What do you think about that? But what I have noticed is the throat in particular that's a really important point. And I think a lot of time has to be spent on it, because it does have, I'm talking about hanging on to things and grasping at things, but I think there's all manner of other things that come out, including confidence, various other things. So it also pays to allow things to happen, but also to spend enough time on each bit, like really spend a lot of time, really get to the bottom of each thing. Because I think that when I was younger, I was very haughty and impatient, and I was definitely working through things. Even though I did it at a moderate pace, I still went through things too quickly, and I don't think I got to the real essence of each segment of the body, I suppose. And, as you say, with age, you just become a bit more able to introspect and to notice things. I guess you just know yourself a little bit better. But I do think, if I was going to do it again, I'd do things slowly, and I would take the mental posture of just allowing things to occur, not so much trying to go for an outcome. So I don't know if that comports with your experience or not.
Yeah, a few things there, yeah. Hyatt had that phrase, he used to say, make haste slowly. So, you need to get to work and take it seriously and get on with it. You're only so much time, but don't rush it. Don't try and grasp for the results straight away, that kind of thing. Just stick to the process. Make haste to do the process, not make haste to get the result. But it's a bigger issue, more of you were saying about it's about what's known and unknown, really. Because if you have an idea of what you think the result will be, and you're trying to find that result, but the whole nature of this work is to lead to an unknown result. You're trying to change yourself on a deep level, or you're trying to self-overcome for real, or you're trying to break free of habits and patterns and stuff. So whatever at the other end of that is going to be something new that you haven't experienced before, and you're going to feel something you haven't felt before. But the trap is you remember some feelings you had or experiences you had that were really good and seemed really meaningful to you, and then you try and grasp and try and make them happen again. You're looking for them, or is that it? Or try to get it, try to keep that feeling, or try to get that one. So you have this limited, tiny idea of what the result will be. The actual result will be much bigger and more important. And you can't imagine what it'll be in advance, because that's the nature of it. It has to. The feelings and experiences will come then. You can't know them in advance. So if you have a plan that you're trying to make happen in this kind of work, you're just restricting and preventing yourself from getting the bigger thing. I did this for years. I just kept chasing different, like, Kundalini type experiences of energy experiences. I'd been making progress in the work, not just undoing work, but other things as well. And whenever I was getting somewhere with it, along with that was coming various peak experiences and cool feelings and all that stuff. So I thought, well, if every time I'm getting somewhere I get the cool feelings and the peak experiences, well, I'll just chase the peak experiences and the cool feelings, and whenever I have that feeling or seems like that feeling again, then that must be progress. But actually isn't. You're going off on a tangent, going off to the side, because you're trying to repeat some old thing, but when you should actually be doing the work and letting the new thing come to you. So that's like the kind of being open to the unknown, which is unknown and outside of you, and you can't guess it in advance if it's real work like this. But the other side of it is, it doesn't mean that, and this is another mistake I made, was to think that because you have to let things happen is to just let everything in your life just happen over and over again after that. So there's a place for making things happen and being very precise and having definite plans and sticking to them, and much more, like left hemisphere kind of behavior. After you've done the work, which was more kind of allowing, like in a right hemisphere kind of way. So there's a time and a place for that. It's not either or. But in this kind of in undoing work and other similar things like that, you have to set the conditions so the unknown appears, not try and decide in advance what the unknown is, because that's absurd. That's the point, is you don't know it. And also not to confuse feelings and peak experiences, no matter how pleasurable or interesting or new, with advancement in the work, because they're not as well correlated as it seems. Sometimes you can have a clear insight that sticks, like a meditation result, insight or attainment, whatever phrases people use, that sticks. Your structure of your conscious experience has changed and doesn't go back. But there isn't very many fireworks with it at all. I've had that before. But I've also had ones where there's lots and lots of fireworks and interesting experiences happen alongside it, and I became obsessed with them, and I actually prevented myself going further with it because I was so obsessed with recreating those experiences rather than doing the work that led to those experiences, which are like a happy side effect rather than the main thing. But it's something everybody gets caught up in. I think it's natural to get caught up in the fireworks and the nice feelings and stuff. And you're automatically chasing the known if you're trying to recreate a feeling you've had, when actually you're looking to create a new way of being that has its own new feelings and experiences, but you can't know them in advance because you're the caterpillar at the moment. You haven't even got in the cocoon yet, never mind the butterfly. So you can fly, you can know what flying is like later. If you try and imagine too much what flying's like while you're a caterpillar, you're just deluded.
Yeah, no, well put. The other thing is...
Stuff, throat stuff, there's you mentioned there's different aspects to it. There's the mechanical structure point of view of where people's head is in relation to their back, where their jaw is, what they're doing with their jaw and all these type of things, and the actual, point out spots on the bones and say this bone is further forward than this other bone. There's loads of like structural things like that make a difference to the tensions in the throat. That level, there's the emotional level. Everyone knows when they get nervous, wherever they gulp. Why are they gulping? There's not so much emotions involved in the throat. And then there's the very fact that even when you're thinking, you're kind of subvocally, subverbal. What's the word? Subvocally. You're kind of speaking to yourself in your throat as you're just thinking words. So you're using all the time, and all the levels of your, that's mind, body, emotions are all involved, are all like the throat is kind of a nexus for that stuff. And social stuff as well, because talking is the major interaction with other people, or talking which has been abstracted into your mind and into your fingertips on the internet, on Twitter or wherever. It's still you're still doing talking related things, social talking, but in a different way, and you're not getting feedback from other bodies who are right beside you, so it's getting you more and more out of touch with the actual real experience of the moment as well. So all these things are going to affect your throat. They have to. As far as technical stuff for it, I haven't been working with that stuff in a while, so you'll have to give people suggestions for that. So,
yeah. Well, what I've done is, because I consider it to be a problem. I think it's a problem with most people actually that I speak to. I think it's an area that's really, first of all, is chronic tension. There's very often when you feel around your neck or you feel around someone else's neck, you could almost say there's like there's an inability to use muscles in the right way. I think you were saying that before effectively. So even the way we talk and the way we react to things, is represented in how we recruit all the muscles in a cluster in real time. And it's interesting because, as you say, the throat is very much a nexus, and I think it's even considered that in the traditional systems. So you have the Rudra knot, and the throat is kind of in the middle of that area in the traditional system. But if you think about it, just physically, it kind of makes sense, right? That you have the head, you have the mouth where the sounds come out, and you have thoughts and other things, and then you have the body underneath, and it's connecting these two parts together. So if you're trying to ignore what's going on in the body, or to hold it back, or hold back tears, or hold back things you want to say, hold back hatred or anger or emotion or whatever comes up, particularly in your formative years when you're a child, the place that you're going to hold to stop that from coming up is going to be the throat in no small measure. So I think this is probably why a lot of people, and I actually wrote about this recently, but I did a few sessions with a few people that I know, just to kind of show them what was going on, and asked them to do a breathing exercise effectively. And I just wanted to kind of watch how they did it as well for my own benefit. Pardon me. Speaking of the throat, I've got a frog in my throat right now. But interestingly, the way that people breathe, they recruit the tongue, they recruit all different bits of their throat. And this is just a normal breath, nothing exotic. And it just seemed to be a real problem area for these people. And I know it is for me as well. So what I've started doing at the moment, the face is not as problematic for me. So I can do those exercises fairly well. So what I do now is I might have 1 or 2 days a month where I take every single throat exercise that I have, including singing exercises. So I publish some exercises that singers use to get rid of excess tension in the throat. And I'll just run through every single exercise in one session, which is a little bit naughty, but I find it to be really quite effective. And I would say the progress I've made over the last 4 or 5 months has been really quite good. And, you know, I would say, looking back, I had, I guess, what you could call almost like a little ball of tension there, probably all the time, or most times. Sometimes it was more pronounced than other times. It was particularly pronounced at work during the day. And I would say that is pretty much entirely gone. So that sense of clutching has gone. My ability to use certain muscles to do certain things is completely reconfigured. But I don't think, I think when you have a problematic area, it can get in the way of everything else as well. So if you have a really hard time with breathing properly, or not recruiting the tongue or the throat when you're breathing, you can't say the R sound properly. You can do a lot of work with the face and other areas even, but it's going to get in the way. So I actually think that if, at least with the face and the throat in that region, that it may pay to not strictly adhere to going face, throat, chest, blah, blah, blah. If you have an area that's a real problem, you may want to focus on spending a lot of time on that. And then maybe once you make a bit of progress and you can do some basic things properly, then maybe start again, and then start with the face and go down the throat, blah, 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 and just make sure you're doing things properly. But yeah, I kind of forgot where I was going for that. But yeah, I would just say that mechanically, for the whole process, the throat is crucial. And what I've noticed is some people have real problems with it, as I have. Just quickly on that, evolutionarily, I think speaking and the throat is a relatively new circuit. So I think it's the ability to vocalize is something like 40 million years old, but more complex use of the throat is very much younger. I think it's within the realm of a couple of 100,000 years or something like that. So it's kind of like one of these bits of the human body that maybe we don't fully comprehend just yet. It's a relatively recent adaptation. And the more I work with tension in the throat, the more I notice the characterological changes, the more the importance of that area is becoming clear to me, both in the way that you're perceived by other people and your experience of life itself, not just in a behavioral sense, but in the way that you feel, the sensations, the feeling of what happens in life has been quite strongly transformed for me just by focusing on this area. So yeah, one other thing you said, it's not all about feelings, and that's a very good point. So we are cognitive creatures primarily. We're not feelings creatures. So one thing, and I mentioned this before, I really didn't do a good job of last time was doing a lot more of the cognitive work. And it's one thing to break yourself down, which is what this is doing. So you're breaking down brain connections and you're loosening things up. But you've really got to be careful that you do things to build yourself up again. And that's why the cognitive work is absolutely essential, because if you just break yourself down and you're just sitting there like a mollusk, feeling good feelings, it kind of defeats the purpose of what you're doing here. So I would agree with you that you've really got to focus on integrating new behaviors. If you see something pop up, like, for example, I would say that I held back a lot of anger and hatred. I know it's probably going to be hard for people that read my essays to believe, but at least in a professional setting, I feel like there were times I probably could have expressed myself a bit more honestly in that way that would have benefited me, but I never do, or I never did, or I rarely did. So when all the anger and hatred and those sorts of feelings came up, which they did early on in the work, I had quite overwhelming feelings of anger and hatred. I took that away and I tried to use it constructively in real scenarios and in ways that I wouldn't have used it before. So it's one thing to loosen up the feeling, to break it down, to let it express itself or whatever else. But it's not actually the point of the work. The point of the work is then that you go and take that energy and you apply it in a new way, in a new and novel way that you haven't really been using it before. And of course, it's a little bit of a dangerous process. It's a little bit, you'll probably fuck up because you're doing something you've never done before or you've not done all that much. So you're going to be a little bit clumsy. And I must admit, there were a few times where it was a little bit clumsy. But looking back, it's absolutely crucial that if you're going to break yourself down, that you do the cognitive work and build yourself up at the same time. Maybe that's the best way to put it. I think Dr. Hyatt said that. Just one more thing, just while I remember, because this kind of ties in with what you're doing as well, I think, in your quest for a Western body practice. I was thinking about it. So we often talk about Armour as a form of chronic tension. But of course, Reich didn't just say that Armour was chronic tension. It can be, but he often spoke a lot about different kinds of muscle tonus. So you have, wobbly or rubbery muscle, muscle with no tension in it at all. Chronically flaccid muscle. And I've noticed a couple of places where I have that kind of muscle going on, that kind of reaction when I try to recruit different groups of muscles for different things. So it's one thing, I think, to speak about doing the cognitive work. So if you have feelings, and then say what I was speaking about before, you have hatred, and then you go and try to apply that stream of energy constructively in a new way. The other thing I was thinking is when you break yourself down physically, which is part of the work, you're kind of letting go of tension. A lot of these areas almost require more tension. So I won't go into specifically where it is in my body, but what I try to do is when I do a breaking down exercise, and I know we were discussing this some months ago actually, I've got some kettlebells here, and I've been trying to do different kinds of movement practice after the undoing session, where I'm using different patterns of movement to try and almost introduce tension into the areas of chronic flaccidity as a kind of physical counterpart to the cognitive work. And as a way, I suppose, of building myself up in the same way that cognitive work builds yourself up after you've broken yourself down. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to like Nietzsche's thing, isn't it, about creative destruction?
Yeah.
I think it's Nietzsche said something. I think that's his phrase.
I think he did, yeah.
Or something similar, something like that. Anyway, yeah, it's it's easy to get caught in this sort of trap that makes you passive, where you're just doing the work and letting it happen. For some people, that's the hardest part, is to stop trying to make things happen. It's just to let it happen. And then, but you can get stuck in the just let it happen, and then you become passive and can't actually do anything with it. And you just end up floppy. So like, there's an analogy I've noticed, or I'll make an analogy between things I've noticed, is that if people do the mind-body techniques or bodywork techniques that are based on just releasing tension, they eventually start getting floppy. They get flaccid, they're like, there's no springiness in them, there's no like dynamism in them.
Yeah.
They just, well, I can't remember, but I'm not going to do any research.
It's been so long.
So you I've forgotten what I'm talking about now. You've sent me back to my youth. So if it's too much on just letting things go, that kind of mentality, just let things happen, then the person, if the mind body technique is like that, then they will end up floppy eventually, and it's actually harder to do something with a very floppy released person than it is a hypertense rigid person, because the hypertense rigid person, you can take that energy that's trapped in them and use that constructively to do things. But the floppy person, they need the tension to be more dynamic, because your muscles need springiness. You need things pulling against one another. They can't just let all your muscles go and release. It's absurd. How are you going to walk around? It doesn't make any sense. No. But when people do the work, when they're releasing the tensions, you feel pleasure. So you just think, well, feeling pleasure is good, so I'll do things that make more pleasure. So you keep trying to release all the tension, you get rid of it all, and then suddenly you'll be down to nothing, and then everything will be great. But I mean, I've noticed with many Reichian people is they don't have the rigid body tensions that you see in the typical people, but they can be quite floppy. They have bad posture, in the sense that, not rigid bad posture, but they sort of flop over bad posture. So that's just the level of that. But then once you get to the level of, that's like the body, lack of tension in the body. But once the cognitive level, you need tensions as well, or you won't do anything. If you're just letting things go, you have no tension in your life, and everything's as equal, and everything's the same, and every sensation's as equal as every other sensation, the kind of things you're likely to be talking about in some kinds of Buddhist practice in the West, then it makes you passive and you don't do things. So you need tension. You can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of it anyway, but you need to use it rather than be restricted by it. And as I say, it's actually easier to work with somebody who's hyper rigid tense than it is to work with someone who's very floppy, low tension. Because they end up like you said earlier. Well, like I said about passive, and you said you can go through a lethargic phase and that kind of thing.
Yeah. It is funny because I was reading a function of the function of the orgasm the other day, and Reich himself is pretty explicit about the floppiness not being a good thing, and he even mentions that it is a form of armor in his model. Like, he describes it that way, right? So it's just funny that everyone's kind of been taken away with this notion of just, emotions stored in the body as chronic tension, but not really been looking at the other elements.
It's kind of there's kind of a noble savage thing going on where they think that if you that modern civilization has added all this tension into it, which is, it has added various tensions in for more complex reasons than people think. And they think, well, okay, you just get rid of all that and you'll just be back to this natural man and everything will be fine. It's kind of like throwing away responsibility. You think, well, if I just get rid of all that and then utopia, like personal, physical body utopia, it's that kind of mentality. And the idea is that because we used to have it in this theory and everything was perfect, noble savage, then if you get back to that, if you get rid of it all, then you'll automatically get back to it. It's just not true. It doesn't in practice or theory, I don't think. And you want to have tensions because you have a goal. That's tense because you don't have it yet, so you have to do things. You're like you want to stand up. You need to move certain body parts away from other body parts in a certain way, and to harness energy and use tensions to stand up. These are essential. So again, it goes back to the getting lost in the feelings, because when you're releasing tension, it's pleasurable. So it's your judgment mechanism in your brain automatically goes, that feels good, I want more of that one, I'll follow that one. Okay, this feels less tension, I'll do more of that one. And you can end up way down a path that's just emotional masturbation, basically. Sensory masturbation. And thinking that you're doing some kind of deep practice into the nature of reality and looking at raw sensations and all. I hear that a lot of the Vipassana type Buddhists on the internet are really caught up in maybe not just Vipassana, but all the wider other stuff as well, jhanas and all that. They're just absolutely obsessed with the good feels, and that's what it all is for them, and they don't even realize they're doing it. And it's a trap. It's like you can do that for years. Eventually you're like, oh, okay, that was just to swap traditions. Now I was just looking at new images on the wall of Plato's cave, but I'm still in the cave looking at the images, They're just nicer. You haven't actually learned anything, or, there's a lot of delusions to get caught up in this stuff.
Yeah. No, well put.
I've been in all of them, and I'm in other current ones right now, obviously. So I'm not this is not a, I've got it right, you've got it wrong kind of judgment. It's just, we're all doing it all the time. And you can't argue with somebody who's getting the really strong experiences and feelings. You can't argue with them that, no, this isn't the thing, by the way. This is just side effects. If you keep focusing on that, you're blocking the other thing. I mean, that's what it is. You really are blocking the better thing. And you can't know what it is in maths. It's a really hard thing to do that. And then what makes it even more harder is the other thing we're saying is you can't just do that forever. Just let it happen. Just let it happen. You have to. There's another side of life, which is the more active, planned, specific, concrete, goal-seeking behaviors that you have to do after. So again, it's the breaking down and building up at the same time. You can't really. I'm saying before and after, but it's not really. You're kind of having to do them at the same time. Because even to do the breaking up practices, you have to make yourself do them. You have to discipline yourself to do them. So you're doing the planning, building up, creating, making things happen thing a little bit. So there's an interplay between making things happen, making yourself sit down and do the work, lie down, do the work, whatever it is, and then also the letting the results happen. So you're doing the right brain, left brain thing. If people are into that stuff, you're doing the I don't know, ego in the world, or whatever metaphors you want.
Yeah, it's the Parsonage guys, and the video game level nerd Buddhists who are just like, I'm at this level now, like they're in some sort of anime, some kind of, what was it, Dragon Ball Z, they're getting all these secret powers and things. And if you go to Reddit, I went to the Kundalini on Reddit just to have a look one night, and it's the same thing. It's this cognitive disillusion and confusion mixed with this pursuit of just these whimsical, abstract loads of fucking gobbledygook. I've never seen so much mental illness in one place. So I just back to the movement thing again, and back to the tension thing again. So I'm starting to think. So what I notice is, so if I do a session and then I untie, a cluster, let's put it that way, a cluster of muscles that are problematic and automated, I guess you could say, for lack of a better way to put it. And then I go outside, and I've been using this kettlebell template, which works on these kind of functional movements. And I've been planning it out so there's certain areas in my body in particular that are somewhat problematic. And what I'm noticing is if I do the active exercise immediately afterwards, pretty much immediately, it actually intensifies the undoing process. It kind of feels like that, because if I'm not using my body in the same reactive way, so for example, if I've worked on my throat and it's quite loose and open, and then if I go and do the physical exercise, I do a number of patterns with a kettlebell, I find that it doesn't take away from the undoing process. I find it intensifies it. Like it makes it feel much more effective. It's you would think it was antithetical to it, but I don't actually think that it is. I think that it works with it, in conjunction with it. Those are my initial feelings. But the other thing is, just quickly, in the traditional models. So when you look at Kundalini yoga, for example, a lot of that is creating tension. So there's not so many movements in the traditional, with asanas and different kinds of breath work and various other things. There's not too many exercises where they lose the tension in the same way. So that they may stretch out, but say a lot of the breath work, for example, where they use their belly to they suck the belly in and expand it out, which is similar to some of the undoing exercises. They're building tension up. It feels like they're building tension up. In a lot of these exercises, they're definitely not aimed at losing tension anyway.
Yeah, I mean, also some of the Chinese Taoist guys are doing this as well, moving the energies around it and with breath and things. It's this is like one of the things where most of the podcasts we've had to say this at some point is like, when I criticize these things, I tend to be criticizing the Western interpretation of these Eastern stuff rather than the Eastern stuff itself, which I don't actually know that much about. Not really, a little bit like most people, but not a lot. So it's the Western interpretation of these things, is the Western way of doing it is to make them passive. It's like a reaction against Western activism, that people see the Eastern stuff and they want the passive things and the nice feels and all that. So I think they naturally gravitate towards releasing the tension because everybody's hyper tense. This is some of the technical, more hardcore aspects of it, where they're like, it's more no nonsense, mechanical as well as the other things. I think some of these things to me look a lot more mechanical in their origins than they're given credit for now. The people tend to think of them as emotional. When people think of mind-body practices, especially Eastern ones,
they're brutal.
They go mind, body, or mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
They always think of them as soft. The Westerners tend to think of them as soft, and it's emotional. It's about feeling. It's about being soft, and they kind of throw out like a harshness. They throw out like harsh physical behaviors, and they throw out a harsh mental discipline behavior often, and they make it kind of fuzzy and nice. Well, really, a lot of these things probably weren't like that at all in the beginning. They're probably much more really disciplined thinking and getting your body to do things that it doesn't actually want to do. It's not getting back to some noble savage old feelings. It's like an artificial organization of the body. It's not going to happen by itself. You have to make it happen with your mind, with organized, disciplined thinking, and making the thinking become movements, essentially, turning the ideas into actions. It's not at all how Westerners tend to think of these practices. It's like, if I do this thing, I focus on the movements and I feel good. It's a totally different understanding. And if you look at what I've seen of the old Taoist stuff, and some of the old yoga stuff and other things, is that they're mechanically minded as well as the other stuff. They're really thinking about specific body parts should be in certain positions relative to one another, and they're not going to be nice, pleasurable. I mean, everyone knows this about some of the yoga positions, that they're painful when people practice them, when they learn them. But it's like this with everything. Why would the best, like samurai's footwork for samurai soldier warriors, they're doing things that don't feel correct. I just saw this a little bit. They are doing movements with their feet that wouldn't feel normal and correct, the right position. They wouldn't feel right. But from a mechanical, technical, practical point of view for what they're doing, it's the best thing to do because that gives them certain advantages or whatever. So there's I saw something where they're more on the toes and things. No one would do this because it feels better. It doesn't. You're doing it because it works better. So there's some kind of, it's more true in some way. But if you're obsessed with chasing what feels right, and thinking if it feels better, it must be better. If it feels worse, it must be worse. We all do this automatically. We're so intimate that judgment, we don't even realize we're doing it half the time. But one of the benefits of having the cognitive thinking as a human is you can overrule that with your thoughts. You can go, okay, so I'm feeling this thing, but I can do this other thing instead because I want this other result. And, I might feel bad when I do it. Maybe it'll feel okay. Maybe it won't. Maybe I'll feel nothing. It doesn't matter. You're judging it in a different way. And animals can't do that. Humans can't. So when I hear people talking about the way they talk about these practices, and they just make it all passive sounding, and they make it all, good feel, sweetness and light stuff, it's like anti-evolutionary to me. It's like they're wanting to cut out the top of their brain and just have this kind of animal, immediate sensory awareness. Cool, well, just be an animal, and you're not able to overcome things that humans can overcome, animals can't, because of being cognitive, which is what you were talking about earlier. So it's like, as time goes on, I think more and more people, I see them, they're hating on the cognitive stuff and the intellectual culture and words and all those things. So they go to the opposite side of things, where it's just all feelings and sensations and movements, and you try to get away from all the intellectual stuff. And then they realize that eventually you realize it's a dead end, and you need that stuff. And that's what evolution has done to humans. It's made us smarter by adding on thinking on top of movements. They're twisted and combined together. They're not separate things. And basically, my work anyway, for definite, and I'm starting to see a movement towards it with some other people as well, is bringing back this link between movement practices and becoming intelligent. It's not a separate thing. You don't just do the practice to be a little bit fit so that then you can live longer, so you can sit at the desk hunched over thinking about your important concepts. It's to bring them together more, and to realize that thinking is for action. That's what it's for. That's what it came out of. It's not for the mystical truth outside of the reality. It's not. It doesn't mean there isn't the mystical truth outside reality. It just means that's not where the human animal, or the animal side of humans. If you think there's other parts. But if the Arnold part of a human is that's thinking grew out of action and will to power and overcoming things and not being killed and surviving and attracting a mate, all those things that sweetness and light spiritual people don't really like to think about, but it all grew out of that. So putting it back together is the thing that I've been working on, and the thing that I think will actually be the future, but we'll see.
Yeah, interesting. I look forward to reading some more about that when you finally get it out.
At the moment, I'm focusing on talking about writing and not writing. You know?
Yeah, I noticed. Every time I see a post come out, I'm like, fuck, he's fucking done it again. Where is this goddamn thing? Dying to fucking read about it.
Recently, I've been doing this thing called using note-taking. So I've been writing lots of notes about things, but I've been very clever in the way I've been writing the notes in such a way that they're unpublishable, so that I can keep writing notes without actually having to publish them. By what I mean is I'm writing bullet points and half sentences and things, because if I start writing whole sentences, then, oh shit, this is turning into an essay or something, and now I have to publish it, you know? So that's what I've caught myself doing recently. So anyway, I'll maybe write something soon. Yeah,
good. Interesting. Did you know the prefrontal cortex, which is obviously instrumental in all of this? So it is genetically, it has less influence. Sorry, coming in?
Literally instrumental. I mean, that's...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It is an instrument for the organism, and, you know, it's the left hemisphere is an instrument, and it's using the right hand, isn't it? For most people, as the instrument for tools. It's all like tools. Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
No, quite all right. Yeah. So it's it is genetically, it has the least genetic influence in that tissue of anywhere in the brain, and that's part of the reason why it takes so long to grow. So we have a protracted childhood, and it kind of holds back, because the more time it holds back, the less time it's influenced by hard genetic factors. Does that make sense? So it's almost
so is it,
outside of it. That's the whole purpose of it, is to also not be animalistic, if you think about it. Yeah, sorry, you go.
So it allows you to, that's why it's more like, because I've heard it means that there's more freedom for it to do things rather than all being set up in advance. Yeah. So like, because the effective neuroscientist Jacques Panksepp, who Hyatt was a fan of, and Mark Solms, who we've talked about here, and you've written about, worked with, and his thing about the emotional systems in the brain. I remember him saying something like, there's the thing about the blank slate, and the people used to think there's a blank slate in the brain, anything could be written on it. There's like no genetics or hereditary effect at all, which is obviously absurd. And then it flipped the other way, where people would say, no, it's all just completely genetically determined. You can't do anything. It's all just like, just happening, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's all even your conscious imagination, blah, blah, blah. And he was saying, well, it's not that it's based on the brain. There's actually two things going on. The upper brain, the cortex, is like a blank slate, but the emotional section, everything below isn't. Everything below is determined by evolution and whatever, and the wiring, obviously early upbringing makes a difference in nutrition and all these things. But he's saying there is a blank slate, but it's only the top part of the brain. But that's not a small thing. That's huge. That means that's what allows for freedom, and allows for improving things, and it's what allows humans to take tools that we have and make more tools out of those tools, and then use those tools to solve problems, to create things and do things, which then creates new problems, and then we create new tools, and blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on, and now we're on a computer. So you wouldn't have that if it was all just genetic, if the brain was all just genetic and it was like firing all the same programs straight away. And then what's really interesting from my point of view from this is, so like if you compare like an animal, like a lamb is born, comes out the sheep, and then very quickly it's just up on its feet, and it's doing stuff, It's like now a lamb. It's like now a sheep, a baby sheep kind of thing. It's in sheep world pretty quickly, and same with the deer and all these things. Humans obviously aren't. You're just rolling around useless as a baby for a long time. So your brain hasn't finished growing yet. The cortex still has all this time to grow outside of the womb. And this is happening at the same time as you're learning to move around and walk and things like that. So our whole, the growth of the cortex, the tool part of the brain, this ability, the human ability that animals don't have, that's actually developing at the same time as walking around and learning to move is happening. So the two things are actually really deeply connected in a human life anyway, but we think of them as separate things. We think of, you do the moving and stuff, you do physical education and then you do your academic stuff. Different things, different parts of the school, different parts of the uni, they're completely separated, different people, they're treated separately. Even in a PE class where you do some academic work, it's still treated separately. You're in doing the work in the class and the theory stuff, and then you go out and do it, and they're not really directly connected. And then in different sports, there's more and more connections between the thinking and the doing, depending on what the sport is and depending on what it is. So there's our life is, the thinking part of us as it develops is interacting with the moving part as we're learning them both as they're developing, right from and language as well. Parents, you're telling the kid, go and put your toy back in the box. Now it's the kids learning how to use turn words into actions. Movements, thinking, cortex, all these things are now are happening together. They're not separate. And then we go to school and then we begin to think of things like language and writing and words as a separate thing from running around, fixing a car. The things get separated, but they're really not. That's the separation is artificial. We're not using our brains properly if you don't continue learning in that way. So if you separate them, so a lot of the problem people have of mind body split and feeling like they're not connected or not integrated, that kind of thing, is, in my view, more from not combining thinking and moving than it is from not being in touch with feelings. Does that make sense? So
yeah, 100%.
When they say a mind-body problem, they automatically think, oh, okay, it needs to be more emotional and more feeling now. It's like that soft feeling, passive, experience the feelings, all those kind of things. Those can be useful tools for certain things to know what it is you actually feel and all those things, obviously. But that will all get taken a lot if you're combining thinking and cognition with movement and actions. So you're actually having to think as you're doing things. Imagine you're learning to dance. Not you're already dancing and all the moves, but you're learning to dance. You're trying to remember where to put your feet. You're trying to remember the plan or what's the next thing and all that. But you're actually in the movement, or you're trying to do you're trying to learn a choke in jiu-jitsu or whatever it is the person's doing. Well, as you're learning, that struggling to learn thing is where the action is, not once you've already got it and you're in this mythical flow state. I think that's just fantasy as well. So my view is that when people are being attracted to mind-body things, they're missing this. They're missing the most important thing is to do this. If you're thinking and moving at the same time, then your emotions are going to get changed at the same time anyway. You don't need to work directly on them. For some things you do, but in general, you don't need to integrate them by being very aware of them. You just need to do things that are a struggle. You have to think to do them, and then your emotions will change along with them, and you'll learn to regulate your emotions as well, because if you're trying to dance, you're in a class, you're trying to remember the moves, you're feeling like a dick as you're doing it, you're looking like a dick, you're struggling, you wish you don't know what to do, and then you just figure out a way to do it anyway. You do it against the discomfort, and you're thinking, your will makes your thinking control your movements. Even though your feelings weren't on board in the beginning, later they become more on board, and now you can do an even more advanced thing, but it will feel a bit wrong when you do that thing. So to me, this is all mind-body methods, but this is completely lost. And to take it back to the start of the rant is when people look at Eastern practices, it's all about the emotional thing and the feelings thing and the being aware of sensation. It's all about more awareness. Well, more awareness for what? What for? it's like pre-animal behavior, sitting around, being aware of everything's happening. What's going to happen? Am I in danger? Keep looking around, big eyes on the side of your head, looking around, worried. Whereas a predator, the eyes at the front, and you're focused on something. It's about action. So I think a lot of these mind-body stuff, a lot of these mind-body methods, and the Western approach to Eastern practices is passive and training people to be like prey animals. Does this make sense?
No, absolutely. It's a reversion back, quite frankly, back to something we're not actually
sitting, being aware. Look, sitting there, I'm going to sit there and be very aware of everything that's happening in my body. I mean, how fearful a behavior is that? Do you know what I mean? But it's dressed up as the most spiritual thing you can do. I'm not saying these aren't useful tools to do things. I've done lots of the stuff and all that. I'm not like a moron. But it's not like an end point. It's just a tool. This becomes people's identity.
Yeah.
And then you just go down the rabbit hole, pointless rabbit holes of what does this emotion mean? Is it this one? Is that one? Yeah. Well, so what are you going to do with it? I'm criticizing myself here, by the way. More than
totally. We all because it does feel good sometimes. But the other thing is I don't think human beings are emotional creatures anyway. So you're not really getting back to anything. You're just being emotional because we're not that. And I think it was a great mistake by Reich and Freud. And particularly Reich, I think that he did make a mistake. And then we got neo-Reichians like Lowen and people like that, who started talking about, emotions is the thing that is repressed and, it has to be expressed and rah, rah, rah. But of course, it's not actually the way the brain works. They were wrong about that. And, emotions are pliable to the cognitive part. And emotions, what we call, at least not the primal emotions, but these secondary emotions where there's, hundreds of different kinds, that's not subject to the cognitive part. The cognitive part is, extremely important and very powerful in shaping these emotions. So it's not, I think people have this idea that you have this core of emotionality, and what you're doing is you're going into this little gooey core and you're just letting all these emotions out and you just let them do what they want to do. But of course, the point of even the Reichian work itself, so even good body work is not about emotions. None of it's about emotions. It's, if anything, it's about managing them, inhibiting them. And of course, you were talking about the prefrontal cortex before, but one of the major functions of the prefrontal cortex is inhibition. Its function is to inhibit. So if you're just this out of control emotional wreck, and you're like a mollusk or a snail, you've got no tension in your body, and you're just sitting there crying all day and just feeling, I've just got to feel everything. In a way, you're not even de-evolving. I don't even know what that is, because it's such a fucking waste of time, because there's functionally no real reason why you would do that. As you say, life is about living. It's not about sitting around fucking having fifis, about stuff. But I do think there are kind of tiers of emotions. I think that you have very strong sensations and drives. So you have things like hatred. That's a good one. You write a bit about hatred and anger, and I think it was Jack Willis that talked about how there's a taboo against anger and hatred. So if you do some of the undoing work, and particularly work with the belly, a lot of that primordial hatred and anger does come up. But I think what a lot of
disgust.
And disgust, exactly. But these are primitive. That
was a big one for me, finding people with things disgusting, which I didn't realize. And you feel it triggers guilt sometimes. You feel like, oh, I should, or like I'm weak by thinking that, or whatever, So
100%. And that's the goal, right? It's not the feeling itself. The goal is why do I feel guilty about being angry? There's nothing wrong with being angry. that's the cognitive part. So it's like, okay, I'm having this. But I think what a lot of people do now is they're like, oh, that's hatred and anger, yuck. I want to go back to feeling the good gooey feelings about love and universal consciousness and all this sort of shit that people go on with all the time. And you were saying about Eastern practices, and it can definitely go down that path because you have this scourge of one-thingism, right? Which is something we've spoken about before. It's like, well, this is it. This is the ultimate. That's all there is. There's nothing else. Personally, I use Zazen as a kind of training. And what I use it for is a training of presence, to remain present, because I find that enhances not just being present, not just, awareness, as you were saying, but it just enhances my ability to do things, to actually do things.
So on the point of being present, based on what you're talking about and your understanding of being present, that's like
sure
cognitive behavior, like you're deciding to stay present, you're regulating your own mind, you're inhibiting other things as they come in, you're allowing things and inhibiting reactions to those things, it's like together at the same time. That's very different from what a lot of people think of. They imagine what they're doing when they're meditating or thought. They think that I'm just watching and experiencing the raw sensations of life, that there's no cognition at all. It's just sensing, like pure sensation level. And if I just keep looking at the pure sensations long enough, I'll have this aha moment and I'll become enlightened, because I've seen it so clearly. This is what a lot of them really do think this. If you just looking long enough, you will see it so clearly that you have this bang and you wake up. It's like underneath what a lot of them think, as if there's no cognition. Well, the whole idea of I'm sitting looking at raw sensations is a concept. It's already cognition. There's that's not a thing possible for anything other than a human or above. It's something else animals are doing when they're just aware of things in the moment. That's a human to be just aware of things in the moment includes cognition, because you're having to self-regulate. It's a really simplified version people have of these things that they don't.
It's comedic.
This is where brain science is actually useful, when you realize like the different levels of the brains and the different ways of experience and thinking and feeling and the different levels, and you realize that they're all going on together at once. So you realize, okay, so if there's any kind of integrating practice, I must be using all of them at once. I can't be throwing out the cognition part and just be in the raw sensations. Like as a way of life, it can be a useful tool for things, obviously, at different times. A lot of it's just becoming more clear to me that a lot of it is just people confusing tools for philosophy or whatever, or they're confusing the tools for the goal, and then they're confusing the they think, and then it becomes a lifestyle, and then it becomes an identity. It's just a tool. It's just a tool, a technique for a certain effect. It doesn't need to be. It's not the only one. There's other ones that might do the same effect, but there's other ones that might look like they do the same effect, but actually it's a different effect. It's not meant to be part of the identity of the person, and it's not meant to be something that becomes the goal in itself. That's the big problem I see with a lot of these techniques.
Yeah.
Like people in the West's behavior towards these techniques.
Yeah, and of course, we just kind of steer it back to the Reichian work, I suppose. A lot of it is highly feminized, and it particularly has been in the last 30 or 40 years. And of course, look, I love females and everything they do, but I think they do fundamentally have a little... Sorry? What was that?
Everything?
Yeah. I just... Yeah. Okay, no, I'm lying. No, I'll cut this bit out, otherwise, all two females that read me will get angry. But they do. They're angry enough with me anyway. I think I always get salty emails about how mean I am. But you know,
sounds like a compliment.
Yeah, well, that's the way I choose to take it, as a compliment. It is, all this stuff has the tinge of that everywhere, including yoga, including, you know, meditation, including particularly body work, and psychotherapy is just replete with emotions and getting emotions out and feeling good, just the whole thing. And I like to think that what you're doing and what a lot of your friends are doing, and you know, at least what I'm doing in my own micro way, is trying to fucking take it back a bit and just not making it about emotions and abstractions about being whole and all this sort of fucking commie gobbledygook that you fucking hear all the time. Just drives me fucking crazy when I read shit like that, because I have to go through it if I'm researching something, or, you know, looking at sources. I mean, if you look at the last 30 or 40 years, it is just saccharine, sugary, you know, sugar tit nonsense. It's disgraceful. And, you know, weirdly enough,
I don't think it was like this. I really don't think the early Taoist guys, Kung Fu guys, and the warriors who started meditating in ancient India, I really don't think that they were like this.
Absolutely not. I'm telling you, Zen is not fucking about, right? Like, it is fucking hard to live that way. And, you know, the other thing is, I've been doing a bit of research in traditional, you know, even Hinduism has this kind of image of being all sweetness and light, which is kind of true, depending on which bit you're looking at. But I was looking at, you know, a traditional course of Kundalini yoga and what they do. It's fucking brutal. Like, it's fucking nasty as. Like, they don't have heating, so they're all doing it in the mountains. It's fucking freezing. You got to get up and you're doing all these exercises all day. What you're talking about, none of it feels good. You're manipulating your body in all sorts of bizarre ways. I mean, no one's talking about emotions in any of this. I mean, they kind of do.
No, because they come anyway. You know, that's the point.
Exactly.
They're not really doing something, because you're using your mind, you're thinking, you have this theory and these ideas, and you're turning them into actions. And they're actions you don't want to do. You don't want to get up at 4:30 and meditate, I'm imagining, when you're learning to be a Zen monk. You don't, or whatever, you know, and like all these things, you don't want, part of you doesn't want to do them. Part of you does, and then your body doesn't really want to do them. You have to all comes down to making your body do things that it doesn't want to do in the immediate moment. It might be to its best benefit, because it's your body. It's like you're responsible for it. Well, the part of you we think of as I, you know, the conscious part, is responsible for it. That's why it's grown it, and it wants you to lead it. It doesn't want you to just listen to it and let it be in charge. That's totally absurd, you know. And all of the practices that really do something, you're making yourself do things you don't want to do, and you're struggling through it according to a conscious plan and intentions. Sometimes you give the authority to a teacher who makes you do it. You know, some people do that guru model or whatever. Sometimes it's like the person's more kind of in charge of themselves, self-regulating, whatever, in a kind of individual, and they have to rely on their own self-discipline and stuff. But the point is, if you use your thoughts to make yourself do things that part of you doesn't really want to do and tries to get out of, you're going to have a lot of emotions when you do that. So what we're talking about is not avoiding emotions. You actually get more emotional experiences doing this, not less. You get more. You get way more when you do try to do coordinated conscious movements, thinking about rational movements and the geometrical relationships between different bony parts, as seen on video. It sounds all very abstract and anti-emotional and anti-feeling. It really isn't. You get way more feelings doing this stuff, the work I'm doing, than you do by trying to feel directly. This is the point. So I think that's it's the feelings and the emotions will come along with it regardless. If you're doing something real, you're going to be getting lots of unpleasant feelings as you're learning something new. You get lots of exciting feelings, which you also have to inhibit your reactions to. It's not just the unpleasant ones. You know, if you're going to stick to the plan that you're doing. The classic is people getting way too excited too early on, and they do too much of a practice and cause themselves problems because they couldn't regulate those emotions of excitement or whatever. And you just that's how you work with emotions. That's how you learn to regulate emotions. Sport, you're regulating your emotion. I'm tired, I want to stop, I have to keep running because the team is relying on me, or whatever. Or, you know, if it's one on your own, I'm going to fall off the fucking mountain, whatever it is. You still have to do, you're making your body do things. Your mind, to be crude about it, you know, your mind is making your body, is telling your body to do things, which your body on some level doesn't want to do, but you make it do it. It sounds really harsh and horrible, but that is what it is. Getting yourself to go get up earlier is that. Getting yourself to pass an exam is that. Getting yourself to talk to a girl is that. All of it is that. Everything is, can you turn ideas, words or images in your mind into actual actions with a purpose? And if it was easy to do and it didn't feel weird doing it, you would have already have done it. So it's like, there's going to be the struggle. It's like everything, the Western approach to all these practices, and it's so passive and feminine and sweetness and light, is because they're trying to avoid the bad feelings, the struggle feelings. They think there's something wrong if you feel a struggle. They think that you should be in flow all the time and everything feels great and you're doing your purpose and your true will and everything feels great. And there shouldn't be any of this friction, when it's the actual opposite. You're doing the important thing, there is definitely friction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that
it's like, it's the thing. It's how you know you're doing something conscious, because you've decided to do something and your body's resisting or the world is resisting, and you have to make yourself do it anyway. That's how you know it's a conscious intention that you're doing. It's not just happening, you're making it happen. Whatever little I you have, a little bit of free will, however you want to define it. A little bit of will. Free will is this loaded term, but nonsense. Will. You have to, you have a little, some will, you know, you can debate where it comes from, but everyone knows what I mean when they say there's a difference between just, you know, walking, you just grab a glass and you pick it up and drink. There's a difference in that and just not thinking about it, between like grabbing a glass and just drinking out of it, or you just don't think of drinking and you do something else. That's one set of behaviors that's just happening. But to actually go, oh, okay, I'm going to pick up this glass and I'm going to do it in a certain way. I'm going to move my elbow in a certain way in relation to my lower torso. I'm going to do this with my rib cage at the same time. I'm not going to pull my head down as I do this, as I go to drink. All of those things feel weird and wrong as you're doing them and you can't remember them and you're struggling to do them. But when you do it and you see it on camera and you go, oh, it felt weird, strange, and you see yourself did it, you know that was a conscious action you just did, because that was not going to happen by itself. Getting yourself up at 6 o'clock to meditate every day is not going to happen by itself. If you have to make yourself do it, eventually it starts happening by itself. But then you should be doing the next thing that you're struggling to do. You know, this is the thing. Everyone has this mythical idea that there's this flow state coming that they don't need to think. That's what it is they think. They're desperate not to have to think later. What kind of, like with the posture stuff, people always say that. When will this posture stuff be done? I don't need to think about it again.
Really?
When you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the thing. They don't say it as blunt as that, but they'll say, you know, how many do I need to be done and that kind of thing. Yeah. I know what sometimes people just mean like when have I reached a
mastery,
phase that won't
relative mastery.
You know, if I take a step up that I don't fall back from, kind of thing, which there are those, you know, higher plateaus you can get to for definite.
Sure.
That's what some people mean, but other people don't. They just mean they want to just get it out of the way and not think about it. And that's what like the people that everyone's chasing flow states is as well. They want to not have to sit there and struggle and think. This is something actually I'm working against myself. This delusion in my own writing at the moment is thinking it should be more pleasurable and flowing more easily than it is. I actually shouldn't. I just need more discipline to make myself do more. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like a mental rule.
I agree.
Non-stop. This hour to this hour. No matter how I feel about it. Because you don't feel like writing. Rarely do you feel like writing. Sometimes it comes out for a big thing, but that's not the main thing. Rarely do you feel like exercising in the if it's like hard stuff, if you're tired that day, or often it takes a while to get into it and stuff. So you're doing these little struggles all the time for things that are worthwhile. But for some reason, when it comes to spiritual practices, people think it should just be nice from the start because you're doing this spiritual nice thing or this emotional thing. It's absurd. And it's full savage mentality. It's the lost paradise. It's everything used to be perfect, and we've done all these bad things, and we made all these tools. And if we just get rid of them, or we forget about them, or we just stop getting out the words in our head and just focus on these little sensations, then everything will suddenly be back to paradise. It's I'm here to say sorry. No,
not going to happen. It's bollocks, nonsense.
I'm actually reading Paradise Lost at the moment. So
okay, so right.
Yeah,
any good?
Very good. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, okay.
Very good. Yeah. I'm a very slow poem reader, though. I take sections and I'll just spend ages rereading and going over it, and for days.
Yeah, I always found poetry difficult too. It does take me a while to get through, like particularly, that kind of good poetry is
the trick cerebral, is to rub it up against something else. Rub it up against something else. So have some other thing you're reading that's different from poetry at the time, and then think how they connect to each other.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the undoing reading, right?
Or compare it to another poem would work as well. But
okay.
But having something for it to, or some other thing you're thinking about, like for example, you could compare like a Middle Ages medieval poem or whatever to ancient Greek poem, and the differences. That would work probably, but I haven't done that, but that would maybe work. But I like to spend a long time with some ideas and see how it connects to other things.
Sure.
Rather than plowing through, I can say on Twitter, I read this book this year.
Yeah, well, that's the most important thing, that you're recognized for it with your genius. And look what I did. Everyone clap. That's what we should do. I think is every time someone does something like that, says look at this knowledge, we can all clap afterwards, and we can send them an audio message and sit there and go, yes, well done, take a bow, and show off.
Yeah, I was thinking of this on Twitter recently, that maybe some days 50% of the posts you see are it's just like literally is just ways for that person to demonstrate their moral superiority over the other people.
It is.
It's like, I mean that totally matter of fact. I don't mean in a dramatic way. I just mean that's what they're doing in the thing. Whatever it is, it's about political. Look at those bad guys. We're the good guys. Sometimes they include other people as superior, but sometimes it's just them. Most people do this. I do this. Be like me, like me. It's that kind of mentality. It's like a template in the brain,
that's what I mean. I think we should give them what they want.
I told you so. Guy predicting stuff, and now I told you so. Right. Like everyone had the same predictions.
Look how good I am at predicting things. See, idiots. And as I say, look, if that's what they want, Kevin, we should all get up. There should be a facility where you can clap and you can make them feel acknowledged that just how smart they are, because that's what they want.
I wonder if the correlation between those people
they should be acknowledged.
And people who. I wonder, do they not have parents and family and that around them who clapped when they first walked?
I don't think they did. I think that might be the problem. That might be the real problem.
Yeah, what do you reckon? I think like it is. I mean, it's like stereotypically Freudian explanation like that. It'd be hilarious.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say on the emotion thing. Yeah, I don't want to come across. Is there anyone we haven't annoyed? So we've done Twitter, we've done women, we've done meditators, we've done Buddhists. Everyone. It's good. It's a good effort. I'm impressed. So there's probably some more people we can be mean to as well. But I was just going to say with the emotion thing, when you do this kind of work, you become a bit like if emotion was a dish, the way that normal people in these places treat emotion is a bit like a fat girl in a cake shop. So you become a glutton and you go around and you want all the emotions, and it's like crack cocaine. You just can't stop. You become engorged, you become fat, you just become generally unpleasant, you become clammy, a little bit clammy. But I think that once you work through this cognitive work, you actually get a greater appreciation for all the flavors of emotion, and it's almost as if you're now a guy that goes to Michelin star restaurants all the time. You're just having these little refined dishes of emotions. I think that's a good way to understand it. Most people these days are gluttons for emotion. They've got their fucking calories way over the top, and that's a danger of this kind of work. But I also, just before we finish, because we've been talking about this kind of stuff for a bit, I did want to bring it back to the Reich thing, just a little bit, because there's a few other things I wanted to throw in front of you. One of those things is dreams, and I've been getting some pretty fucking crazy dreams, and there were two dreams in particular in which I had very strong energetic experiences during the dream. So almost, I guess, what you describe as a Kundalini experience, but it was inside the dream itself. And that experience coincided with an event in the dream kind of thing. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about this, because not doing too much work and allowing yourself to dream and allowing things to unfold is incredibly important. And I would imagine with the work you're talking about as well, the movement practice and various other things, really when you're sleeping is when everything gets done, in a way, when everything gets done. So if you don't mind, I'll just go through, well, one dream in particular, which was extremely potent. And I wouldn't mind getting your feedback, because it was kind of interesting. The first one, I don't remember the content of the dream, but I remember something happened in the dream, and I had an extreme, the Kundalini sensation rocket up my spine into my head. And it was extremely powerful. Like, I woke up sweating and I remember waking up in my chest. There were involuntary movements in my chest, and I was just like, I was full blown, just awake. And as soon as it rushed to my head and exploded, that's the exact moment where I woke up. And I'm just like, fuck, what the fuck was that? The second one, I can remember the dream as clear as fucking day. And not all of it, but the significant part at the end where the experience happened. And I remember walking into a room with red curtains. It was a little bit like Twin Peaks, the red room in the Black Lodge, kind of looked like that a little bit. And there were 12 ornamental tables, and on each table there was this kind of ritual object, and on each ritual object there was an inscription, and the room was wafting with incense, some kind of incense. I think it may have been frankincense, something like that. It had a very church-like kind of vibe. And I remember kind of floating into this room, as you do in dreams. And I was informed by a voice that each one of the objects was inscripted with one of the names of the devil, one of the 12 names of the devil. And each ritual object had one of these names. And I later looked it up, and I couldn't find any symbolic significance of this that I'm aware of. But if anyone knows any Christian theology where that might be a thing, please write me. Please write me and let me know. And I remember being in this room, and I had a look around, and I just left, and I walked down these stairs, and all of a sudden I noticed there was a cave at the top of the stairs that I'd walked down, and these flames and this drumming music flared up inside the cave. I could see the light from the bottom of the stairs where I was at. I could see the light shining out of the cave and some sound coming out. And the sound and the light was like fiery, and I could tell it was a fire that was generating the light. And I knew something was coming. And I was down at the bottom of a set of stairs looking up, and I had a feeling that it was probably Beelzebub himself. I had a feeling. And what emerged from the cave was my grandmother. So my grandmother, what I assume was the devil in the form of my grandmother, which is the least devilish form in my life, was my grandmother, who sadly passed. But she floated down the stairs towards me, and it was quite menacing. I knew that she was trying to, or it, whatever it was trying to intimidate me, was trying to scare me. And I surprised myself in the dream because I didn't run or anything like that, but I stood there and faced the apparition that was coming towards me, probably with evil intent. And I let out this roar, a little bit like this huge yell, this roar that just echoed through the whole space that I was in. And as I did that, I had this extreme, what I could only really describe as an extreme surge of energy, again, up my spine, this kind of, you know what it feels like, of course you do, it's this pulse, this strong pulse, and it went right from the bottom of my spine, right up through my skull, and it did that 8 times in very, very fast succession, so it was kind of like bang, 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 as I was yelling. And whatever this apparition was, it got scared away. And at that moment, I just woke up again as that energetic experience was reaching its crescendo. But I woke up and I remember, even this is a month ago or so, I remember the whole thing clear as fucking day. And again, I woke up kind of sweating a little bit. My heart rate was really quick. And I was wide-eyed. I couldn't get back to sleep again. But those were the most potent dreams that I've had during this work. But I've also just had a bunch of just very vivid, extremely vivid dreams, which I've been trying to write down when I can remember them. But what do you think of that? Have you had an energetic experience in a dream itself rather than in real life? So I don't think I was imagining it. I think it was real. It felt real because I could feel the hangover of it when I woke up. Like I could feel there was still the tingling and, you know, various other physiological, I suppose, artifacts of that experience that happened in the dream itself. So have you had that? Is this just me?
Yeah, I've had similar things. I had a bunch like that years ago when I was doing a lot of a combination of Reich and of modern Alexander technique and some other kind of esoteric things I was doing. Yeah, it's definitely the energetic experience driving the dream. So like you're having the experience as you're sleeping, so the dream is interpreting the energies, you know. That's the way I understood it. I don't think it's the dream is the thing, and then you have energy, you imagine the energy after. I think the energy thing is the real thing. The dream, yeah, I had ones where they were very like mystical or religious even. I had a lot of them early on, and they were terrifying. And then they got less and less scared. And during the dreams, I did what you did, where in the beginning I would run. I used to get this thing. It was like a voice version of sleep paralysis. Oh, so you were talking about throat stuff earlier. So instead of my body being stuck, I couldn't speak in the dream, and I was trying to shout something in the dream. I was trying to say something that was going to get rid of the bad thing in the dream, and I wouldn't have my voice, and I just couldn't speak. And then when I started living with a girl, I found out that I was shouting my head off in my dream at this point. I didn't know before that I was on my own, you know? And I was living in a house with people. So somebody must have heard me, you know. So I'm shouting in real life, but in the dream I'm saying nothing. So that's already quite weird and interesting. But what I noticed was the dreams, the more. In the beginning, I did what you did, where I would try and shout at the thing, and I couldn't get a voice, and then or I was trying to running away. It was a big one I was doing, and then eventually I've learned to face it, and then it evaporates in some way. The problem or the operation or whatever it is will eventually go away if you face it directly. That is cognitive control. That's what that is. That's conscious control. That's self-regulation that we were talking about earlier. You know, when you're able to just stand there and feel bad and face it anyway, you know? Because even in your dreams, you run away from the bad feelings and try to get the good feelings. You're doing that all the time in normal dreams. But when you start doing work on yourself and these kind of things, you're developing conscious control over your emotions. So that's like a dream version, a mystical dream version of what we're talking about. But the energy thing, the number 12 obviously is a meaningful number.
You'll tell me about it. What do you think about that?
I mean, 12, zodiac.
Right. Yeah.
I think 12, you know, it used to come up in different things. Obviously, the apostles is 12, but that's probably based on the zodiac, the number 12, you know, in some interpretations. The reason is 12. That's controversial, I understand. The stairs and the cave thing, I mean, that's classic, like, mystery tradition visuals, you know, where there's a cave stairway, it's going up, cave is going down, but your cave is at the top of the stairs. That's interesting. The devil stuff, yeah, I mean, I used to have, it used to be real evil beings when I was having them that I was aware of. And then eventually there was this, like, light would appear and the evil beings would go away. But the evil beings felt really like, I couldn't see them, but there was this one time and there were like 4 of them and they were like, you know, heat waves in the desert coming up from the ground.
Yeah.
It was like, you see the heat wave. It was like that, except more dark. And they felt like literal snakes. And what I mean is, I don't mean serpent mythology symbols. I don't mean that. It felt like a kind of weird, maybe like get weird now, blood memory of being in a forest with snakes around me and real, genuine physical danger. That's what it felt like. It didn't feel like mystical. It felt much more physical. Obviously, it was mystical, kind of, but it felt a lot more physical, the danger. And then the light came and they went away. And it felt like I was taken to safety. I mean, that could be the experience of a little monkey as its monkey mother pulls it off the tree where the snake was. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's how they experience it. I mean, why would it be like our more definite experience of objects? Theirs is going to be more kind of dreamlike, probably, you know, the experience of a monkey in a tree, running from a snake, terror, joy, you've been saved, you know? So,
sure.
So yours sounds similar to that one, those ones I had. The actual energy up the spine, yeah, I know that one. I haven't had it in a long time, really. On a couple of times fairly recently, but in years, not really so much anymore, because I'm not doing as much of this intense work like you're doing. It would become a seizure in my brain for me. It was like the energy would come right up to my brain and I would just have a seizure, except instead of blocking out like the seizure I did have years ago, I would stay conscious and I was getting like flashes of light and everything up, and it was very definitely up in the front of my brain or on the right side of my brain. I could feel where it was in my head. It was like, I felt like I was aware of the brain, the physical brain, at the same time as I was up in the stars, literally like rushing through space with stars, you know, like Star Trek kind of imagery, you know. But it was like a seizure. It was like all over my brain. It wasn't like, it was very interesting and fascinating, but it wasn't pleasurable. It's not the right word for it.
Right.
And it felt like metallic-y and tinny, and I had a weird taste in my mouth after it, and it felt like I'd been like pins and needles or electrocuted in my brain, physically electrocuted. It was like that.
Wow.
And that was the top end of the rush of the energy up the spine. So it's the same category of thing that you're talking about, I think. Yeah. And then what happened later was the dreams got the dream part of the energetic experience. So you're having this energetic experience sleeping, and then you start dreaming, and then the dream is themed on the energy. So in the beginning, they were much more mystical and religious and symbolic like that, and then later they became more and more sort of clean and just matter of fact. Like one of the ones, they stopped having all the fear stuff got less and less over time. It was like absolute terror in the beginning, and then it just got less and less fear. This happened all over like a couple of years. I was getting less and less fear. The fear went away, and then eventually even symbols and that went away. And it was just one of them. I kind of came to in a dream, like I'd been asleep in the dream, and then I suddenly became aware of my existence and burst out crying in the dream. And it was the same experience as all these ones, but I didn't have any of all the drama. There was none of the mystical stuff. It was just like, I just became more aware of myself energetically. Very strange. The energy leaked at itself kind of thing. And then it was just clean, simple. Woke up, felt great. But the other ones, I would be like shaking and had energy problems and weird coincidences for days and after. And then just got off on tangents, like try to get more of those feelings. This is one of the things I've been talking about, where one of the things I was referring to is saying that when I got the peak experiences, I would try to create the peak experience again. I was like, what can I do to get more of these visions? But actually what I should have done is do more of the work, and the visions will come and then they'll go away by themselves and change into something else, maybe. Unless you're William Blake, he'll get work, maybe he'll make art out of it. I don't know. Because that's what this is what those guys are having. I mean, look at William Blake's paintings, this stuff.
Yeah, particularly like him, right? 100%.
Imagine think of the dream you have. I bet the visual structure of it was similar to William Blake paintings, or ayahuasca guy paintings, and some people have more like that. Mine's aren't like that, but they're more like the vision thing. It's like a third thing, isn't it? It's like you're saying it feels real because it's like it's not awake, but it's not dream world either. It's something third place. It's like different. And you're really there, but it isn't physical reality, but you really are there. It really is a thing that's there. It's very strange. It's vision world.
Particularly Billy Blake.
What was the voice you heard, by the way? You heard a voice speaking to you. What did the voice sound like that spoke to you?
It's a good question. It's kind of the part that I don't particularly remember very well, actually.
Your voice? Was it similar to your voice, or was it a external, like another being's voice?
I think it felt like another person's voice, but it was
female.
It was almost like not a voice, but it was. Yeah, I'm hard pressed to say if it was a voice or it was some sort of half voice, half telepathic-y kind of thing, if you know what I mean. Like, come to think of it, but it was a male. There was a male influence.
Once I've had, they were definitely male or definitely female. They were like, there was no, like I've had both. And the female ones were nice and softer and less threatening and loving. All the classics, stereotypical stuff you'd imagine. The female infused dreams. The male ones were menacing and predatory and like.
By the way, you cunt, here's your grandma in the form of a devil.
That's classic. That's like, what's he going to do with this one?
Yeah.
It's like kind of it's a wicked thing, but it's like they weren't really like active predatory in the sense. So like I came to think of one time I had one where I had this it felt like I was there, and it was like the vision was like a red. It was like Mars, like a reddish orange Mars background, like you were on the planet Mars, but it was much more orange, and it was like vision world, it wasn't like solid, and there was this presence right around this whole scene. There was this menacing presence watching me, it was really creepy, just looking at me, doing nothing, just looking. And
really,
so like I had all these mystical interpretations, is this, I had all these theories. And more stuff happened after, but I don't want to say it now because it's too much of a tangent, and it really sounds crazy, but maybe another one. And so this thing was definitely around me, and then I asked it, could I see it? Because I was more conscious now, because I've been having these and things that just happened to me. I had no cognitive control of what was happening. And then this time I asked it to see it, but what happened was I woke up, and then I saw there was like an awareness in the room with me, but it was very clean. It was like my own, you're kind of aware of your head. You're aware of around your own head right now.
Yeah.
It was like there was one of them just 2 feet above my head in the bed.
Right.
It wasn't me, but it wasn't not me either. And it was definitely there like a ball of consciousness. It's so stupid sounding. And it just sat there for 2 hours. I just sat there for 2 hours looking at it. It was like definitely external, and I was wide awake. In real world, like this is the weirdest things that ever happened. And it was like I couldn't see anything; I just knew it was there. And it came after asking this presence in the dream. So anyway, later, so I had all sorts of mystical over the top interpretations. Then later I just thought from the brain point of view, okay, so what maybe happened was my cognitive part of my brain in the dream woke up, and the presence that was around me staring at me kind of menacing, and it was kind of serpentine, you know, it was kind of lizard-like, like that. I thought, maybe that's just my cognitive part of the brain was surrounded by the lizard watching brain, you know, the old reptilian brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like watching, you know, it's like watching everything you're doing all the time. It's aware of things all the time, you know, it never relaxes, you know, it's always checking, and that's what it was. So that's the feeling of it menacing and predatory, because it is menacing and predatory. It's a lizard.
It is. Yeah.
It's not, but it's not actually
slithering around,
because it's just watching. You're not putting it in danger. You know, you're not endangering it because it's older and more built into you than the cognitive part is. So like, so the dream to me was quite a good analogy, of quite a good visual metaphor for the little cognitive part is tiny and surrounded by the bigger lizard, deeper, older brain systems that are quite scary to us, the cognitive humans. They're quite scary to confront these things. And maybe that vision world is how lizards experience life. You're just seeing kind of lights and stuff. It's just like one being is menacing another being, and then some action, and then menacing, you know, hiding in and out. It's, you know, very big, like, because also before that I'd had a dream. Part of the dream was I was like on the ground as if I'd been poisoned, shaking on the ground, you know, shivering as if I'd had poison, like lying on my side. Right. And you know, hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. Well, what's the lizard brain doing? It's interested in keeping things hot and cold. Do you know what I mean? It's like a regular, you know, it has to go
the homeostatic in and out part of the brain.
Thing,
yeah.
So it's almost like I was experiencing the lizard brain. My cognitive brain was like direct experience of the lizard part of the brain. This is the secular version. Obviously, I have weirder mystical versions too. But the secular version is that it was confronted with that, and then you're in the dream vision world. You interpret it, and so like your one would be some kind of interpretation of what was happening to you energetically at the same time. That's my theory.
Yeah, interesting. And of course, it's a good bit of advice to go slowly, because this is the part of the brain you're fucking with. So you do want to be a little bit cautious.
If you're awakening the deeper parts of your brain and getting direct access to it for your upper parts of the brain, that's fine. If there's the lower parts are just your emotions, oh yeah, okay, I feel my emotions more, and I know what I'm actually feeling, and now I can behave better because I know what that feeling really is. That's child's play compared to what the fuck is this fucking snake looking at me for? You know,
100%. So the Komodo dragon is lurking in the background.
You are the snake, but you are the snake in this fucking thing. You know, the menacing thing is you. That Beelzebub thing is fucking lizard, and the fucking is like it's the rattlesnake or whatever. You know, it's like, it's kind of frightening to know that is part of you right now, but that part is keeping you alive. You need it. Yeah, and you're a lot of being human, denying that part.
Yeah, and in a way, it's not just dumb; it's extremely intelligent. So you need to learn to trust it, right? Like this is
It hit a lot longer than us, yeah.
Yeah, way older, way older.
I mean, it really has, because it's made by, you know, genes, and then all these bodies and experiences, and then it's built up, and then it's like that's in you now. It's like it really is old. It's like it's
billions. Well, since there have been brains, neural nets.
Yeah. So if you're doing weird brain experiments, you're bound to have parts of the brain will talk to each other that don't normally. So. And the energetic stuff is probably when this happens, it either causes the energy stuff, or the energy stuff is what causes it to happen. I sway on that. I don't know what way around it is. But the Kundalini type experiences is a real thing. Not just as not that most people talking about are talking about the real thing. They probably aren't, and they're talking about minor things usually. You know, little buzzes and stuff on their back and weird, but some people get really messed up with it, because what happened to us is it was because we're working ourselves for long periods of time and sticking to it. The energy is eventually regulating itself or whatever, or being directed straight upward into the brain, and then you have this experience and insight. But for people, it doesn't even get past their belly or their chest, and it goes off in all weird directions, and it fucks them up, you know?
Yeah, they go psychotic. Like, yeah, if you go to the Reddit place, there's people who are like, this just happened and now I'm fucked. I'm like, damn, sounds rough. Damn, that's
it's genuinely dangerous. I mean, that's how you know it's a real thing, because there's actually real dangers. You know, it's not like you're not just. It's not one of those things where you're just legend in your mind imagining stuff. And the probably the biggest. That's how you know you're doing something real, I think, is because things happen that you aren't comfortable with, and you try to stop it happening, and you realize you can't. So you know you're not making, you're not imagining it or trying to will it to happen, because a lot of that stuff I was like desperate for the weird experiences, and then as soon as it started up again, I was terrified and wished it would stop, and it wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? So like it's not me doing it. It is a real thing, and that kind of that process of going through those dreams and those energy things did all that ego world work that they spend all the time trying to destroy the ego, and that resolved a lot of that for me. I didn't care about that stuff anymore because it flipped it round. The false ego, or however you want to describe it, kind of just burned away and that stuff, And in your dream, you just things are literally burning away.
Yeah.
So it's quite clever. The metaphors are quite clever, and your one's they're quite blatant. The occult symbol, devil part, I think that's just maybe that's your lizard brain interpretation. Maybe it's a demon. Maybe it's maybe it's.
I hope this doesn't get onto esoteric Twitter. Everyone's going to say I'm possessed. He's possessed. He has to go and get baptized.
12 means something, definitely. And the 8, you said 8 times.
Yeah, the prior time, 8 surges. Yeah.
That sounds like each of the chakras.
That makes sense. That one made sense. Yeah.
So like the 12, I'm guessing that's just a kind of, because you're, that's a religious symbol of like 12, but this is the devil with his symbols. It's not Jesus and the apostles. This is the dark side kind of thing. This is your shadow or whatever. If you want to secularize it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
But the grandmother thing, that was the part I'm like.
I knew she was dead before you even finished it. It's always someone dead for this. I even had one about there was like a woman. I had one with my grandparents, and in the it was like one of those weird vision ones where it was kind of real, and they were sitting in my uncle's house, and they smiled at me, and I was sitting looking and smiling. I was so happy to see them. I was crying in the dream and in real life, and they reached out and put their hand on my leg, and then they just suddenly their eyes rolled in their sockets, and I woke up, So like I saw them as dead, but no, but it wasn't creepy though. It was like it was the end of them. It was like in the dream they'd I think that one was actually a memory coming up, because I was thinking about the dream and the angle in the dream when they were sitting on the chair and I was looking at them. I was quite eye level with them, and I was standing up. Right. So I must have been a kid, and I used to know them, and they used to go to that house and stay in that house. It's a couple of doors from my parents. And they would stay with my uncle, and that sometimes they would be up. So it was like a memory of me standing there as a kid and going through to see them, probably getting a sweetie or something, that kind of age. And that memory had come up, and it became part of this. The dream used that memory or whatever for whatever reason at that time, And at the end, I had the kind of I don't know, whatever is it like making grief releasing or something maybe, and. Like if you can easily make these things really like make sense from a brain point of view, without getting too woo-woo. But you could also get woo-woo about them if people want to. Question for you for your one though: did you, when you had the energy explosion and you did the scream in the dream, were you present all the time, or did at any point in the dream or between the dream and waking up in real life, did you disappear and reappear, or were you always there? Like your awareness itself.
It was so intense and so rapid that I was there the whole time, I think. So as soon as like the surges happened, the electricity up the spine while I was yelling, the apparition disappeared, and the next thing you know, I was just up. I was awake. I'm like, fuck.
So during the scream, with the scream, did you flicker in and out of existence, or was you just there as normal?
No.
Has anything changed after? Did anything change after? Did you do you feel differently about your existence?
A little bit. I felt differently about grandma. That's for sure.
What's she hiding?
No, yeah, I felt. You know what? I think I did, but mostly. Well, we'll put it this way: dialing into Teams the next morning was a little bit of a different experience because I was so taken aback by it and just how vivid it was that I just was kind of a little bit just all vacant and just thinking about it. And yeah, but I can't say really that it changed the feeling of what was happening necessarily. But I've not really thought it through in that way. Maybe it has. Yeah.
Because one of the ones I had, and I'd been doing a lot of the sort of combo of undoing and at that time Alexander technique, and I didn't realize how the structure of things had actually changed for me, because it was a big event, the vision and that, but I didn't realize it actually changed the structure of how I was aware of things permanently until really it was only almost a year later. Because after the first one happened, I started going through cycles of this happening. So it would build up and happen. If I did any practices, they would happen. I could get it to happen in 2 or 3 days. But generally, it was every week or two I was having one of these big things would happen, and then it would die down, and then it would build up again, happen again. I would try and forget about all that stuff, and then I would find myself becoming a little bit interested in weird esoteric things or something like that. And then that would develop into doing some more practices again, and then I would have another event like this. And then over time, they became less and less weird and mystical and more normalized kind of events. But I had, by the end of a year of that, I was like, oh, I've actually, from that first one, the relation between subject and object in my mind had changed, flipped. But it was so subtle. The flip was so subtle. The event was so big, and I was so focused on the event and the visions, I hadn't realized that actually it had flipped, and it was the same thing that the stream entry and those things that the Vipassana guys not talk about was that. I didn't realize it was that until a year later, because I didn't know about that stuff. But everything changed after that point. The first one I've talked about in the podcast years ago, but the pure white light experience and stuff, I disappeared and reappeared. And then I thought, well, mental vision, I was obsessed with it for a little while, and then I just didn't really think much of it. But a year later, I was like, okay, that was that was it. That was the main thing. And I hadn't even noticed the main thing. The most important thing about that, I hadn't even noticed. Because I was so obsessed with the feelings and the vision and the details. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
I hadn't realized that now I was vaguely aware that I felt more, I said this actual words to people, I just feel more wired into the universe now. I don't feel existential terror about being alive, which I didn't realize I had. It was just gone now. I just felt wired into the source, to be new age, And I mean that in a physical way. I mean electrical way. I don't mean...
You're emotionally whole.
I don't mean in a symbolic way. I just mean I felt and then back out of it,
Yeah.
And so I felt that, and I felt, I just feel I don't feel like existential terror anymore about existence. But then I sort of put that to the side as if it wasn't a big deal. And then a year later, everything that unfolded over the year after that, I was went straight back to that one event. And before that one event, I was neurotic and obsessed with waking up and all this stuff. And then after that, I didn't care anymore about that stuff. Yeah. And it wasn't as big a deal as people make about it, But also it wasn't nothing. It's way better after, but it's not it wasn't some kind of it wasn't obvious at all.
Yeah.
And I made the mistake, this was getting to originally, was I made the mistake of obsessing over the details, and I kept doing things to try and get back similar kinds of visions and stuff like that, and started doing all this other stuff. And it was a diversion. I actually stopped myself. I would have probably made a lot more progress along that line of the insight line. or whatever you want to call it, or illumination, or whatever words. Yeah. I would have made much more progress with that in that year if I'd stuck to doing the practices I'd been doing that led to that, rather than chasing to create the visions again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. What I have noticed, because I did make some notes here actually. So what I've noticed, and here's the thing, I agree with you. It's almost like you need a significant amount of time for it to all make sense in context, because you're changing, I guess. You need something to measure that against, and you don't necessarily have that until you go through a certain amount of time.
Your neurons must have to grow and develop and wire together.
I think that's, that it must literally be that. And there are some things that definitely have happened in the last month. I'm not sure if that event was the climax and then all of a sudden everything's totally different. But one thing in particular, the last month-ish, right around where I had the dream, more or less, there's been an extremely strong reduction in amygdala responses. So in particular, and I was talking about this before, but fear, anxiety, grasping, I feel hardly any of that anymore, particularly about things that I maybe would have been a little bit anxious about or ruminating about. That's almost totally gone. Sometimes I'll go through periods of a few weeks or something like that where I have a bit of probably what I describe as a kind of lightheaded, disassociative state, a little bit, and a little bit kind of not an unpleasant thing, but just I feel a little bit distant to everything, and I'm just kind of doing stuff, like which is quite different. But one thing for sure is I'll be normal and I'll just be doing stuff and I won't notice. And then at nighttime in particular, every couple of days, I'll have this moment where I'm like, fuck, things are actually really different. And then it's almost as if my entire perception of everything just flips with that realization. And I have this kind of experience of actually things are a lot different, but I don't notice it mainly. And then I have moments where it just flips. And that particularly happens at night. For some reason, in the early evening, that's when I have those experiences where I'm like, actually, the effects you're having are pretty intense. So you should probably notice that. Does that make sense? It's kind of this more gradual thing.
It sounds like a similar thing to happen to me. It sounds like it's an actual awakening stage. So it sounds like it's and it grows, because I obviously have the psychophysical viewpoint anyway, but for me, it's never, all this stuff has never been separate from body world. It's always been like coming out, growing out of it, or somehow intertwined with it. And so there must be, it just take time for, like if the energy rushes up your spine, which is part of the spine, is an outgrowth, the brain is an outgrowth of the spine. So the energy is rushing up your spine into your brain. And the brain, there's neurons everywhere, all over the place. It's rewiring neurons at a deep level from the lizard brain up, brain stem up. It's rewiring things, and the neurons must be getting all wired in a different way, and it will have to grow. And the way that they grow will probably depend on what practices and what you do for the next year. That's what I'm saying. I fucked up a lot of things. I could have done it much better. I think that year after that is probably the key. It's probably so important, and I was just a moron because I wasn't part of a tradition, so I didn't know what to do. I was just making it up. I kind of got better intuitions after it, actually. I was following my
intuitions. Were you working with Hyatt at all during that period? Like,
at that point, no, it was after. No, he died about, this was 2014.
Yeah, okay.
February 2014.
A teacher would be good. It really would be, like, for a lot of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just had no idea, and I had no tradition or no anything, and I didn't even realize that, like the main thing that happened was what all those guys they're aiming for. And it happened, I hadn't even noticed because I was so busy. Oh, that was interesting in fireworks. And then I was doing stuff in my life. But things did change then. Like important people came into my life. I stopped doing certain things, and like all behaviors just improved naturally and stuff like that. And I had more cognitive control, and I mean like a more self-regulation, more being aware of things. I just vividly remember this guy where I was on a training course, and I went to the door. A delivery guy came to the door, and I went to answer it because the people who ran the place weren't there. And he came across, and then some other woman came across that was living in the vicinity to try and deal with the delivery guy and whatever. And I just remember them speaking to me face to face, and I was like, oh, I'm not even remotely any social nervousness in my mind. I'm not thinking of anything. I'm just, other than this
present.
I've just been listening to what they say and being completely in the moment without any effort, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like all that neurotic social awkwardness and
the autism disappeared temporarily.
It's gone. It's gone. I was just there. And I was just looking at them, waiting for them to speak. And then I noticed, that's the key thing, was I noticed that they were doing it though. Like they had the thing. And I was like, fuck, we all had the thing. And I just got rid of it. Now everyone still has it. Shit. So that was interesting. And so there's a bunch of stuff like that came, but I still had no, like, there's no person saying, oh, it's really important, you should do these things now because at some level, if there is a bunch of neurons being rewired after the energetic experience, or you know, the brain orgasm, as Hyatt and Rigardi called it, then you've only got that year to do it. You know, you've only got those few months after that to do it. Neurons take a few months to grow new neurons, or they wear away and stuff. You know, if you don't, you have to keep using them and stuff. So I lost a lot of good opportunities, I think, in that. Not that I'm sure you can recreate it.
Oh, totally.
Also
you can still break down. I mean, that's what it's doing, right? So I mean, you could do it again, I'm sure, no doubt.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. But I mean, I would need to set myself up life for chaos for those few months, maybe. But it probably wouldn't be as bad this time, I don't think.
No,
but
mine's not as bad. I remember when the first run, I had a lot of out of control stuff happen, whereas this time it's not as bad. But my engagement with it is better. So I'm not getting probably as many as crazy things that happen.
You also don't always get all the answers. So like one of the visions things I had was like a language was being spoken to me, a non-language. You know, it's like it was kind of sounded like it could have been English, but it wasn't. You know, I didn't understand any of the words. And it just went on. And in the middle of it, I stopped trying to understand it. I was like, I need to try and remember this so I can try and understand it after. And I just thought, fuck it, I can't. I'll just let it happen. It's just blah, 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 for ages, and then it disappeared. That's never been explained to me. Like at one point when I heard someone reading the Beowulf in Old English, I was like, holy shit, that's the language I heard. Fucking hell, it's Old English. What? And then I heard then I heard like ancient Greek. Oh, it's ancient Greek. And then I heard like, you know, reconstruction. Then I heard fucking inside else. At the moment I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's Enochian language, you know, John Dee magical angel language.
Yeah.
So like I've only seen that because I was in Prague, and you know, they were in Prague, so there's interesting stories.
Yeah, right. He was too, wasn't he? Yeah.
I was in the place. It's in Anders in Krakow as well. So two places I've been to fairly recently are the two places that they were. So I was interested in that stuff again because I was like, oh yeah.
Is that where he did the scrying? So anyway, was it in Prague, or was it?
Both of those places. Yeah, in Krakow. Yeah. And
okay, right.
Doing parts of it. Yeah, there's like diaries or parts of that, and one of the initial important things. I think that's Prague. Yeah, I think the wife's fucking is Prague. Yeah?
Right.
I can't remember.
Charming.
So like that's never been explained to me. I'll never know what that was. But I mean, the secular explanation, which I entertain most of the time, is that it was like a kind of glossolalia, you know, like that kind of talking in tongues thing that people can do. Because it was like the syllables sort of, but there was no symbolic content. It was just all the noises together, you know, different noises you could use for speaking, but it wasn't speaking. Although it did sound like a language. Sure. So I have no idea what that was. I mean, that's pretty creative invention of my unconscious if it just came up with its own little language, but why not? Maybe that's where languages came from.
That's the thing that's really striking me, and I kind of always had an idea of this. If I've done psychedelics before, and you go, well, there's clearly something more going on that I'm not accounting for. But what's really striking me is how much the unconscious comprises of, because as you say, you can have these experiences and dreams or whatever else, where you hear different languages and all different kinds of things that are going on. And, I think people are right when they say that it really is a universal consciousness. It's almost like it's everything. And we're just grabbing just this little part of it every now and then. But it just seems to, I don't want to sound like a fucking hippy-dippy idiot, because I've just been taking the fucking piss out of people like that in the last hour and a half. But you know what I mean? It just seems to be something deeply impersonal and something really huge about it. And it just seems to know stuff. It seems to know so much stuff. To the point, as you say, you have a dream, you're hearing all these different languages and things. You're like, how the fuck, did I just walk past someone reciting Beowulf or Beowulf? Like what, how did I take that in? What happened?
You see what you said there? So I thought of that too. And what I noticed from trying to figure that stuff out, one of the conclusions I came to was that that's how you know it's a real thing that's kind of mysterious that's happened, is because you don't try and make it more mysterious. You try to rationalize it to make it normal. Because normally what happens when you get some kind of weird thing or a kind of psychic experience, oh yeah, they phoned and I thought of them, and people always exaggerate. You can tell they're trying to make it that thing. They're trying to.
I can feel there's a change coming. Can you feel it?
They want it to be true, yeah. So they're trying to rationalize the app to being true. Whereas when the actual things happen, is you don't do that. You really you're a bit scared by them because there's something unknown to you. So you're scared of the unknown.
What's that? How does that work?
Yeah. And you're like, no, it can't be. And then you come up with all these things, and then every secular basic excuse reason now could come up with something there'd be something that was like, no, it can't be that. It's just like, I'm not being honest to say it's that. It's not that. It's something more than that. And then eventually one's just like, I just simply don't know. I can say, if I'm in a mystical mood, I'll say one thing. If I'm in a physical mood, I'll say something else. If I'm it's like I can recognize when people have had the real ones as opposed to the wanting it to be true ones. Often they don't speak about them a lot, the real ones, and they will, but and then a lot of the very experienced teachers and that, they avoid all this stuff. They don't talk about it. Yeah. And they tell people to ignore it and stuff. Zen guys, obviously, they're like that, aren't they? They just shut up and sit down.
Well, that's interesting, because I spoke to my master about this, because during the last session, the last retreat, I had a bunch of extremely strong experiences, obviously, because it's a mental thing to do anyway. And I was asking him, like, how does this tradition treat energetic experiences? Have you seen people have them? Rah. And yeah, I mean, obviously the Zen person is going to say, well, no, I mean, they say just ignore it because it's just another thing that's coming up, during your Zazen. So there's no point cultivating it or worrying about it, because it's just another thing that's coming up, just another phenomenon. That was his opinion. But then, of course, you have other forms of Buddhism like Vajrayana or stuff like that, which explicitly uses Kundalini yoga and breathing techniques and
they're using visions of deities and stuff like that as techniques, isn't it? So, yeah. And then whether you just treat it as a technique or whether you treat it as real, this is where they get into the problems of Westerners versus people who grew up in that culture, because I don't know how much you could really believe it the way that somebody grows up in these cultures, and a particular point in a civilization's life cycle is important as well. It's like it's not simply geography; it's also time. Yeah. Some things you just can't you can't unskeptical yourself. Like we can't.
No,
Westerners, you're skeptical by nature. And you know there's all these different ways of things, and you can't just believe things in a naive way. You can get yourself to believe them and pretend that you don't have doubts, or you can consciously decide to believe things as a technique because you know it works, and not care that you don't need, you accept the doubts because it's like kind of a trick that you're doing to yourself, and then some kind of vague various mixtures of that both approaches I've seen people do with, but there are some traditions where you use these kind of experiences. That is the technique, but a lot of them it's a distraction. Obviously, it's the Zen master is teaching you. He's there teaching you a specific practice and tradition. So this is a distraction in that practice and this tradition. By definition, you're not doing, if you're obsessing over that, you're not doing the practice. So in a technical sense, it's true what he said. But if you're interested for other reasons, and there could be other reasons it could be interesting. I mean, brain
well, I must admit, Kevin, being the kind of guy I am, I'm very naughty with it, and I may have been doing things that I wasn't meant to do.
So are they probably though. They know. Yeah. So they also, I'm guessing from their point of view, they're behind the desk or however it works. When you go speak to them, and they're like, in their head, they're like, okay, this guy is at such and such stage. That's a sign of progress. He's doing the right things. Just ignore it and sit down. Because he knows that that's what you need to do next to keep it going. You know what I mean? So in a way, he's not dismissing it. He's actually he's taking on what I'm guessing. So like this is, if it's a legitimate true thing, authentic thing the person's had, telling you to just ignore and sit down could literally be the best way of listening to what that person just said. But also for most people, they're bullshitting themselves most of the time. So they're probably just rolling their eyes going, just shut up. It's all shite. Doesn't mean anything. Just sit down. You're too new. You don't know anything yet. Because that's probably more common, I guess there's an art to that stuff. I don't know, maybe those masters yap to each other about weird shit that happens. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think as well, the fundamental aim of Zen is a little bit different. It's not really like you have side effects, I'm sure. Some people do. He told me stories about, people sort of collapsing mid-meditation and shaking on the floor. So stuff does happen to people. I did ask him, has it ever happened to you? And he's like, I've never really had anything like that. But I think the fundamental, realization of Zen is not necessarily contingent on energetic experiences, not necessarily.
Yes, and it's also selection bias, because the people who are less inclined to that stuff gravitate to the traditions, less inclined to it, and the people more inclined to the weirder stuff will, the person will do Tibetan Buddhism who's interested in the weird stuff before they do Zen. If they're a Westerner choosing, different obviously if you grow up there.
Sure.
And even within these things, they send these, don't they? They'll send them to a different place and stuff if it's more suited for that particular person, especially like in, if somebody's more, for some people, they're better to go to different things. That's something I'm actually quite good at. I'm quite good at knowing intuitively what a person should do as a practice and not do as a practice.
Interesting.
I don't know how. It's just a sort of weird empathy
thing.
Yeah, it's just I've been quite good at that and like where they're at and stuff like that. But I'm not making anything of it. I've had a few people ask me questions when I've been talking about stuff, and I've like given them advice that seems to have worked. I know people who had medical issues that I'd had, like epileptic kind of stuff, and how to deal with it and stuff. And because that's epilepsy is in the same ballpark as this stuff. A person rolling over while meditating and shaking on the ground. That's like, in ancient Greece, that's like the oracles talking to them, it's just a different time. It's in the same ballpark, But also there's a secular, basic physical explanation you could have that would make everyone happy to. So you don't need to believe anything. I'm like, this is what I mean about skeptical. You can't unskepticize yourself as a modern Westerner. You just
totally. Totally. I can't understand why people even bother. Like, why do they bother? You're like, you can't fucking do that, mate. Like, come on. Don't be an idiot. That's kind of, I feel like I'm restricted to Zen in a way because it was the only one that was bare enough where I didn't feel like a fucking dickhead doing it, kind of thing. Like, but even then.
A lot of people are there for the pomp and circumstance. You know, they're not there for the
ritual
anyway.
Feeling good. Again,
they like
feeling good.
The aesthetic. They just like the aesthetic of it. You know, people like the idea of going away to be a monk in Buddhist monk in Thailand. But actually, for that person, they'd probably be way better being a Benedictine monk in their local local monastery. You know? Like for results. But that's not that they're not at all interested in that aesthetic. So it's like, but people, it's hard to see that for yourself until you've got somewhere, you have no like intuitions or anything you can trust in the beginning at all. You know, just blind luck, I think.
You know, the funny thing about
or a teacher or somebody helps you, you know.
Yeah. The funny thing about a lot of those Western Buddhists is they are deeply Christian. Like the ones that I know, like going around condemning people and like they've got all the hallmarks, your average fucking Bible thumper. But for some reason, they just end up in Buddhism. You're like, what the fuck? Like, I just feel like you're missing the point. They'll be sitting there looking at all the rules in the canon and like fucking, you know, looking, okay, if I do this indiscretion, I'm going to spend, 500 years in Burmese Buddhist hell getting prodded with fucking bamboo sticks. I mean, into all the fire and brimstone stuff and the morality.
It's medieval superstition, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, dude, why not just go, as you say, just go to the fucking local church? It's fucking, you're seeing things the same way. I mean, what's the big fucking deal, man?
Well, that's the funny thing. A lot of them, you'll see, especially like the ladies will get into some kind of weird kind of occult kind of exotic occult stuff they get interested in, and actually there's far more action happening in their, the women doing the rosary in their
knitting class
at mass, or like are more doing more like esoteric stuff than they are. You know, they really are, like, because it's like, but because I heard somebody was explaining what you're doing and like in doing the rosary, for example, is you're training together your imaginative faculty, your words, obviously your words, imagination, feelings and sensations with the fingers and the beads and that. You're actually training all the parts of your brain together at the same time, you know. It's in an active way against, and you're struggling because your mind's being distracted all the time. So you're saying lots of these words. You're moving the beads, so you get sensations. You're getting the verbal, left hemisphere, whatever. You're imagining these different scenes from the Bible along with the words and stuff like that. So you're directing your imagination, your right brain kind of thing, at the same time as the left brain, same time as the physical actions, all in a sort of ritual context or whatever for a certain amount of time. That's like legitimate meditation, brain integration training. That's just ignored because it happens to be Western, you know.
Yeah, it's feels stuffy,
and that's far more,
dusty.
And it's far more rigid, and that's like rigid and harsh. There's like rules. You have to say certain things, certain times, in certain order. There's no like get out of that. You either do it or you don't. There's like the beads. You're forced to. You can't delude yourself for that. I'm not recommending this to people. I'm just describing it. And whereas like the ones who get into all the new age exotic stuff, it's all fuzzy and they do a little bit and then they stop and then a little bit and then they stop and then they feel like they've done something, and it's because they just don't like their for political reasons or aesthetic reasons or whatever, or they just don't know the stuff's there. I mean, for me, I didn't know a lot of that stuff was in the West already when I was interested in a lot of those things. You can make there's people doing weird things everywhere in the least suspected place.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people into this kind of stuff. Yeah, it is political. I mean, I was talking to a girl who's into vagina fucking ceremonies or something. It's like that's
a euphemism if I've ever heard.
Yeah. No, it's like what's it called? A yoni ceremony or something with it. I don't know what it's. She said something about, I don't know, steaming your genitals, or there's something that happens, like some sort of, you know how they, yeah, I don't know. It was, I think it was steaming, or they do something, or cleaning your vag. Hang on, let's have a look here. Yoni, or you put a rock in it.
I'm not searching this in case she happens to be using my computer and sees my history.
Anyway, it seemed to me. Yes.
That's feeling some. Why is this the same wrong with me? Look what he's looking at. Okay.
Look, it may have just been this girl. She was one of those, you know, yoginis with the, you know, the henna fucking tattoos and things. I won't go into how I came across this person, but anyway, it seemed to me a little bit like a, you know, feminism whacked on a fucking Hindu yogic retreat kind of thing. You know, let's get in touch with our vaginas and. You know, I mean,
there's tantra stuff for women only, isn't there? But it's kind of hardcore.
This wasn't
like, it's not lovey-dovey stuff. It's like harsh kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that definitely wasn't it. That definitely wasn't it with this girl. Yeah.
Well, compare them with sweetness and light stuff. Oh, everybody loves each other, and all their bodies mean this, and empowered their own, but like all that stuff. Compare that to like
my vagina.
Compare that to you must sleep in a cemetery for 3 days. You know, like those kind of things.
Drink out of a skull.
Yeah, I mean that's stuff you do. Like it's like way more. You know, like you will change your brain and your consciousness by doing these crazy things, but you know, again, not recommended. But it's all there. You know, people are doing really mental stuff to change their brain and using behavior. And we're just getting to the point now with science where you could actually use medicine and surgery to change the brain side of it as well as the behavior side of it. So you could really like see a morphing of human types coming soon if people start connecting some of these more extreme behavior modification techniques with actual like physical brain change techniques at the same time, because that's not really been done before. You know, you have to change your brain from behavior. You have to do all sorts of breathing exercises like undoing and those things, and you have to put a lot of effort into it. But if you could just do a little bit of behavior and hook yourself up to some kind of system that's affecting your brain and body physically as you're also doing the psychological, mental, conscious behavior at the same time, you could probably do 10 years of work in 6 months. Who knows?
Yeah, you could potentially. Yeah, that's interesting.
And then really start making some weird people out of that, you know, like where your lizard brain is there all the time, you know, you're aware of it all the time. I don't know what that guy's behaving like. That was like horrible, terrified.
It could, you know, it could end up like June. I feel like June. Every time I read that, I'm like, fuck, like this guy's onto something, right? Like you could have like orders of fucking whack jobs and all sorts of things going on. Interesting.
If you get really like the high tech version of those things would just be mental, you know, like some of the more wild stuff monks have been doing, and the tantra people and those things. Who could, you know, when you combine that with high tech, who knows? Somebody must be doing it somewhere.
Imagine the vagina ceremonies you could do with all that tech. Incredible.
Maybe that's why the monks locked themselves up away from the women in the first place.
Oh, you know, you surely you would have to, if that's the sort of stuff they're gonna be, you know, burdening you with. I mean, of course you're gonna fucking lock yourself away, aren't you? I mean, I felt like locking myself away. Let me tell you. As soon as she opened her fucking mouth, I was like, "Get me out of here!"
Actually, talking about lady mystics, there's one who was a good one who's similar, who seemed to have similar experiences to what we're talking about. Saint Teresa. So if anyone's interested in the sort of Catholic monk kind of stuff, or nun kind of stuff.
The recent Saint Teresa, or the
yeah, I think it's like of Avila. I don't know what it is. I think it's Spanish maybe. A few hundred years ago, I don't know when it is, and she had a thing about the interior castle, and basically there's visions of different levels. It was basically awakening. was like a system of awakening, but with using visions and stuff like that. And she's definitely having Kundalini experiences, 100%.
Carmelite nun. Yeah,
I can't remember what she calls it, but she's like she's doing this stuff. She's like one of those people, and she's a Catholic nun. So I don't know if she got in trouble. She probably got in trouble with people or whatever in those days, but I don't know. But it shows that there's the stuff's there for people to play with that's more structured and isn't just woo-woo, because she's been like having bad experiences with it and stuff as well, and she's struggling and scared and all those kind of things. So it's like, that's how you know it's a real thing. Obviously she's doing it that symbols, she's doing it in a certain symbolic structure that other cultures will do it slightly differently, but you can tell that it's real, because it's not it's just so different from the that kind of stuff you're talking about, the silly spiritual stuff, and putting hexes on the president, all that stuff.
We'll get Donald Trump with a hex. Yeah. Okay, so she's got ecstatic mystical experiences, meditation practice. Here we go.
Yeah, she's an interesting figure,
the prayer of quiet. That's interesting. This sounds a bit like...
Yeah, so that's why I don't remember. It's years ago since I read it, and it was in the middle of having all this experiences we're talking about earlier. Towards the end of it, I stumbled across it, and she seemed to be doing a mixture of stuff that you would call like the more kind of meditation about the more like Zen and insight kind of stuff of that end of it, and then also the other more kind of visual, visionary kind of stuff as well. She seems to be doing all of it.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. Yeah, very interesting. I'm gonna have to check her out. It's kind of like Saint John of the Cross. He was similar, I think.
Yeah, same kind of.
He had a lot of stuff.
Same gang.
Yeah. Carmelite.
Maybe this,
what's
like,
a Carmelite?
I mean, your dream. Maybe this is what I'm saying. Maybe this is like a unconscious thing, because maybe the reason I'm bringing this up, maybe there's something in her that's similar to what you were saying about your dream about the one you said with the 12 things and the fire and old Belzy himself.
Beelzebub. The Leviathan. Yeah. I was thinking, if he was in the guise, or he, or whatever it is, was in the guise of my grandmother, what that could mean. It's almost as if there's parts of, well, there was a dream prior to this where, you know the movie The Thing? And before you were talking about running away from shit all the time, well, I've had similar stuff. I'm just constantly running away from things for the last fucking 6 months. I've just been running away. And there was this one dream kind of just prior that I remember very clearly too, which was, there was this thing-like thing in the movie The Thing, this kind of amorphous, spindly alien. And it was kind of running around the place, and I was trying to contain it. And no matter what happened, it kept getting out. It kept changing shape and kind of getting out. And I remember at the end, I tried to put it in this box, like this big concrete, movable, weirdly movable box. And I'm like, I've got you, little motherfucker. So I got him in the box, and I'm like trying to get him in there, and I just kind of woke up. But all the dreams kind of seem to have this theme of there's this force that I'm trying to put away that's always coming, like trying to come out, or that's probably not the best way to put it, but trying to, how would you describe? Like I'm trying not to acknowledge it or something. And by being in the guise of my grandma, it's kind of hard to ignore the unpleasantness. Does that make sense? I don't know. My thoughts are not coherent.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely means something. Every single thing as a whole structure means something. Like people go wrong, I think, with dreams when they try and just pick one bit and try and think of a symbol for one bit.
Yeah, what did Jung say about this symbol?
Every detail has to make sense as a whole structure. And so the gran will mean something, but it could be like it could be
the least devilish.
Could relate to a memory, or I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it might be something to do with connecting, or you've got like good and bad or polarized on some level, and this was them being unpolarized. So this is the image that appeared in the moment where they reconnected. So you had like a false, fake polarization of good versus evil, and then this is like they really are like, now it's one thing, and you have to, it's like your natural organic decision about what was good and evil rather than what was built into you. Maybe because that sounds like the opposites, because you had the literal devil behind her, and you're the kind, sweet grandmother, the definition of sweet kindness. So it does seem like it's the opposites. The staircase with the cave at the top means something. Cave at the top of the staircase. That's interesting, because the cave, you think. So
the subterranean is up the top.
It's at the top. Were you coming down the cave or going up the cave? Were you going down the ladder or up? You said you were coming down.
No. So I was going down the stairs. I'd walk down the stairs, and it was almost like
you're going lower than hell. You've been kicked out of hell, and you have to go lower. Like
maybe, yeah. I've gone so fucking low that there's not even hell anymore.
You're not good enough for here. Like. No. Yeah, I don't know, but it may be a memory, maybe related to memory, maybe a good. It does sound like it's a good, especially with the ritual 12 things and all. It does sound like it's a good versus evil, a good evil kind of thing, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah. Does feel like
both there together. That's the point, because the question you have there basically is, why are they connected? Why are they not separate? So maybe that is what the dream is saying. It's saying they aren't separate, or your current understanding. It doesn't mean there's everything's equal. Not a relativist, obviously, but your understanding of it is like fairy tale kid. Well, maybe not fairy tale, but like overly polarized or whatever. This would be Jungian, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Yeah, or it could be that there are parts of myself that I'm sugarcoating, that putting the grandmother visage over something that's diabolical. I don't know, and that was a confrontation, or there's a symbolic representation of that confrontation with those elements of my character, and coming to terms with them, and almost not being lived by them, perhaps, as much.
So the 12 objects all had secret names of the devil.
Different names of the devil. And I did look it up. I'm like, are there 12 names of the devil? But I couldn't find anything about it. But it's interesting to think about. I did look.
There's different names. That's different. So there's different manifestations of one thing, and then the manifestation of the one thing actually has a face or a mask, a cloak of good. It could be a sort of cynical one, where the evil's pretending to be good. It's got like a cloak of good, and you've just seen through it, like or it could be that to me, it just feels more like it's like your brain has had polarized good and evil, like from a long time ago, and then in the energetic experience brought those things together for integration, and at the point of integrating is this vision. Do you know what I mean? This is like the brain's. This is your metaphor for what just happened energetically.
Yeah,
that's a guess. The 12 things, it's like could be hours of the day. Who knows?
Could be, yeah.
Could be. It's like ones I've had where it's I had all these dramatic snakes going up and down snakes and ladders to come out with this amazing interpretation that meant this, and it was all this great thing, and then it was like something really like basic, it was like it just referred to some basic thing. It was like simple. But it was along with other stuff that was more weird. So this is why, like, a psychophysical point of view is useful, because you're like, okay, what's the psyche side of this, all the symbolic kind of side of this, and what's the just raw physical, see it, touch it, concrete things? Explanation for this, and then how do they both go together? Like, not either or, how do you have them both together? Is there a way that they both sit together? And sometimes you're like, okay, so I was experiencing these things in the dream, but my body was experiencing this thing, the energy thing. That's the dream's just showing me what just happened in my body, or what was happening. You know what I mean? You're just like, it's like it's almost like a Schopenhauer thing where there's the will and the representation. The will is the energy rushing up, and then the representation is the dream trying to make images to make sense of it, to make a left hemisphere version of the right hemisphere experience. Could be that way of looking at it. But it doesn't mean that. So, like, if that is what it is, the dream isn't nothing. It's not like that doesn't say the dream means nothing. That means the dream is telling you what happened. For real. It's like that's the metaphor that your brain, body, soul, whatever, decided to communicate to you of what just happened.
But the thing is, you don't remember dreams that often, right? But every now and then you have ones that are so impactful that you just don't forget them, which is.
And the thing I've noticed only recently with that is what we're saying about the cognitive control of our self-regulation, or when you're just aware of yourself for real. I've noticed a lot of these things have an aspect of that in it, which I'd never noticed because I'd be so focused on the fireworks, the details, the vision, that I hadn't realized that the theme of it was like something about the self. It's like, like what you did. I turned and faced and stayed and faced the thing was fearing and waited, and I reacted, I screamed, I did something back at it, and then it stopped. That's the real thing that happened, actually, if you think about it.
Totally.
It's just all content. It's like that's the plot. The rest of it just happens to be where the characters and where they made the film. That's just the set, the characters and the location and all that. And but really, it was the character. What's the word they have in films? Where the character, he has his redemption arc. That kind of thing.
Right.
Well, doing the running around and did something. That's what happened, and now you have that ability. Now like now you have this level of that was this first step of some level of cognitive control that you never had before. But because we're multi-brained creatures, the moment of that happening, you get some weird metaphorical dream vision. Because it's such a big thing to happen, it doesn't just happen and then you just carry on. You can't just decide to have more cognitive control. You have to do something. You have to do practices, which you were doing, and then during the dream, the work is done as your brain's changed, healing or growing or whatever in your dreams. And you asked earlier. You said, "Oh, is it the same with the work I do, the psychophysical work? Is the work done when you're sleeping?" But yeah. So like you have to do the conscious struggle work when you're awake, but then there's only so much you can do. Then you go to sleep, and then the next day something just happens that you couldn't do before. Something happens when you sleep. It's not just simply practice. It's during your sleep, the brain is like either figures out what you're trying to do, or it makes some other connections, and just something new becomes possible. That's why you need to keep the momentum and keep going.
Yeah.
Because you're growing a little bit all the time, and your subconscious it's kind of like you give a standing order for certain things. Like every day, every night, you sleep knowing, okay, I need to do more of this coordinating movements thing, because we're going to be doing that tomorrow.
Yeah, it's almost like you're making an order. Like you're looking at the menu, you're like, yeah, you know, and you're sending it back to the kitchen to be made overnight. Yeah.
Basically, So if the longer you're doing it, the more it knows that's what you're doing, and then it can start making longer term. Because like if your subconscious is rapidly intelligently to your conscious behavior during the day, and if you're stopping and starting things, everything it does to help build that would have to be short term. So it'd have to be like, okay, we'll improve this little bit now because he's going to stop doing this practice in a week anyway. But if you're doing it all the time, and it knows some level, it knows that you've been doing this one thing every day for a year and you're going to be doing it for another year, it can start making changes or connections that take a long time to connect. Maybe, you know, it could start
dedicate more resources to it, right? Like,
because nothing will happen just now. There'll be no benefit from this for 6 months. It's like the sports. It's like a sports team who, instead of just buying new players and taking them in, they go, okay, we're going to spend all our money this year on the youth development, and we'll get no benefit from it for 5 years. But in 5 years, we'll have all these homegrown players coming for free. You know, it's like that. It's like you just have to put up with it. There's no immediate benefits. Delay of gratification, which is a type of cognitive control. It all comes back to the same thing.
It does. Yeah. No, totally. Absolutely. It's almost funny that we have all these ways of just doing that thing, all these bizarre ways. If you go back to the Hindu example with the Aghoris, you know, the guys that eat dead bodies and fucking do all that kind of weird shit on the banks of the Ganges of Varanasi. That is just so extreme. It's like, is that really necessary? But interestingly, they do say that is the fastest way to unify with Shiva. So they call it the left-hand path, as opposed to, you know, the more sugar-tit right-hand paths that are not evil. But these guys do the disgusting stuff, like they get dead bodies, they eat dead bodies ritually, they fucking take the skulls, they rub themselves in, you know, cremation ashes at cremation grounds. As you say, if you think about it, all they're doing is conscious control, just a really fucking radical version of it. Like just about the most radical version I could possibly think of.
So it's what it is. Yeah. You're doing so. You're making yourself do something you don't want to do, and they're picking the most disgusting, terrifying things. You know, sleep in a graveyard, eat like. You know, like it's the worst, most vile, horrible things you can think of. And there's probably plenty of legal things they do too as part of this stuff. You know, I've heard of stuff. And but that's what it boils down to, is you're making yourself do something you really don't want to do, and then you're using that power of ability to make yourself do things to think something and turn that idea into action, physical movements with a purpose, regardless of how you feel about doing that. And, you know, there's like many other less messy, horrible methods. But yes, they would take longer because they're not as extreme. So that's, if you can get someone to do such extreme things so quickly in a short space of time, they probably become much more conscious, much more quickly. But then you've done a bunch of horrible stuff you have to live with. So, as a downside. So. But
then again, maybe you're so fucking off the planet by the time you finish that it's probably just not going to fucking matter. You're going to be like, I don't even know where you'd end up if you're someone like that. By the way, I've just
that is just a beacon for psychopaths and sociopaths. So I mean, like,
it could. I'm sure it is. I'm sure that's a huge part of it. No doubt. There's just quickly, it could apply also to putting a yoni egg in your vagina. Just to clarify, that's what she was talking about. I had to find the thing. So it's a little yoni egg. It's an egg-shaped stone that you put inside your vagina to promote sensuality, femininity, and healing energy. And the article reads...
Okay, so it's just a new age dildo.
A new age dildo. And it says, think twice before putting a yoni egg in your vagina. And this is Living Healthy magazine. So if anyone's interested, that's what I was talking about. Just in case I seemed unhinged.
I'm glad we've ended this podcast with actionable advice.
100% for the female audience, just in case you're not offended enough already. Here's some advice. Well, hey, that could be conscious control as well, if you think about it, in a sick sort of way.
Well, I mean, actually, to go back to Hyatt, I mean, he in the Tantra CD series, he's talking about a technique, a sex technique, where you do counting, and then you're like, you're thrusting and then stopping, you're counting based on the numbers the person says and things. That's all conscious control. That's what it is. Except it's during sex, where you're like in sex mode, and then you have to stop because of whatever the person calls the number, and you're allowed to do that. You have to do that many thrusts. It can be the guy doing it, or it can be the girl on top, whatever, it doesn't matter. And the person has to stop or do it the amount based on the number the person says. And then obviously a huge part of your body and emotions wants to do more. You don't want to stop, and you're forcing yourself to stop. So that's like an extreme, that's just taking an extreme emotion and forcing conscious control through the extreme emotion. Simpler ones. I mean, it's no different from, I will sit down and, I will focus on this object. I will focus on a candle. You're staring at the candle, 10 seconds later, you're thinking about something else, you're looking around the room. Oh, you're back to the candle. So it's the same thing, except it's less dramatic. Yeah. It's less emotionally involved. So for some people, probably the more extreme ones works better, because they don't have enough of the little self-discipline in order to do the small training for a long period of time. They have to be forced to do the big extreme training for a short period of time by other people. Not forced, but teacher guided, which then gets them through the start. So it's different kinds of people, because I always laugh at like Jocko Willink kind of self-discipline advice. His self-discipline advice is, oh, you want to get up in the morning? Just get up in the morning. Oh, you want to do this? Just do this. His advice is literally, if you want to be self-disciplined, just be self-disciplined.
Just have to be
self-disciplined. Let's go on with that then. It's ludicrous. It's like he's a self-disciplined person by nature, and he doesn't know how to teach it, because you can't. His type of self-discipline you can't teach. It's like a certain type of guy, and it's a very emotional type of self-discipline. It's not conscious. It's like you overpower. No, actually for him it actually is a bit. I mean, he's like smart, and he's an actual warrior
selling energy drinks.
So you need a lot of conscious control to be an actual warrior, managing men at the same. It's like that's real. However, that's like by nature. So guys like him have that by nature. You can't just, like the weaklings who need his stuff can't just do his stuff. They just can't.
No way.
It's not realistic.
But also, he's one of these guys. It's like you only need 5 hours sleep a night. Good.
It's almost like, nature. That's just him by nature. Yeah, it's nature. You can't just do that. It's like it's just the way that guy's wired. That's why he was doing those. That's why he was doing those roles. He didn't. He wasn't like a normal guy who just, we'll just throw him into a war and he'll just come out the end of it like self-disciplined guy.
Like commander, for a SEAL team.
It's like it's a unique set of skills, and like I've said before, like in this annoys a lot of the sweetness and light spiritual people, is that a lot of special forces guys will be more conscious than people who've been doing spiritual techniques for 20 years. And I mean that literally. They have more conscious control, they have more self-awareness, they have more spatial awareness. They definitely have more ability to turn ideas into actions. And the sweetness and light people will have this image of them that they're like brutal machines that are just automated machines, where they drill one behavior and then they just throw them out, they shoot them out they drop them out the plane, and then they just automatically do all these automated behaviors, and it does the stuff, like there's no thinking involved. It's just drilling. It's not that at all. They're hyper conscious control, doing things that you don't feel like doing all the time. Their whole life is doing things you don't want to do. That's the whole thing. Dangers, blah blah blah. So like those guys, by doing that, are going to end up at the end of that way more conscious and wise in the traditional sense than a lot of people who aren't. And then if you think back, a lot of the mystics were warriors first.
Buddha
started the Jesuits. What's his name? Ignatius. I don't know how you say it. He was like for years, and then meditated in a cave, kind of, the classic thing. Then loads of them, loads of them are like that. So
the Buddha was the warrior caste.
Everyone had to be warrior in those days, So it's like all of that stuff is missed out. Why? Because they're dealing with struggle and unpleasant experiences. what do people want when they look at spiritual products? It's the good feels as soon as possible, and for everything to happen automatically, and they don't need to take any responsibility.
Yeah.
Or they're bored and just want fireworks, or they just want, yeah. So,
No, totally. Interestingly, with the special operator guys, I was reading a paper where when they go into warfare, their autonomic response is better regulated. So when they're in a shit fight, they're actually calmer than what they are walking around normally.
Because it's acting, yeah. They're acting. They're now doing things. Yeah, guys like that probably aren't. If they're anxious about something, they have to do something. There's no way they can just
sit around and theorize about it.
Yeah, have to do something. Yeah, it's partly by nature. The guys are into that. I mean, I'm not that type of guy. I'm not a warrior type. I'm quite physical, but I'm not anywhere like that. Guys are just like that usually, or they're not. Some guys can be not like that, and they can get thrown into things and become a bit like that. That's true, obviously, but it's very arrogant of spiritual practitioners and stuff to think that they're really guys that